thank you for coming. My name is Patrick Matsche. I'm with the National Ready Mix Concrete Association, and I support our Build with Strength platform in the Western United States. My colleague Brandon Ray, who's in the back of the room, is our dedicated California promoter for the Build with Strength program. He's based in Sacramento. If you haven't met Brandon, please take a few minutes to say hello and swap cards. Brandon can help you out with your projects as we go forward. The Build with Strength program is a member-funded program, so we represent the ready-mix concrete producers around the United States, and we represent about 60% of all the concrete that's imported in the United States. The Build with Strength program is designed to support vertical concrete construction. We're going to be focusing a little bit more on single-family residential construction here today. We're going to have some multifamily as well. So you're going to get to see some different product types. You're going to meet some folks that are involved in different levels of those types of projects. Our speakers today, we're going to have Amy Roard and Chelsea with the Valley Contractors Exchange. They are our hosts today. And I'm also in the back of the room. If everyone can please give a warm thank you. Welcome to Carrie Moore. And after the ladies regale you with the program that they have, which is actually really super cool. And I think it's going to be a game changer here in Paradise, Hughes County area. Nicole Bateman with Habitat for Humanity is going to come up, and I think Raul is going to join you as well. With Mike Dalzell's help, and you're going to meet him in a second from Fox, we had an amazing experience earlier this year in May, and Dennis was part of that. You're going to meet some of these people as the day goes on. Jared. Never having been involved in Habitat, it was an amazingly heartwarming experience. I thought I knew about Habitat. I think we all kind of know about Habitat, if you will. But once you really see what's involved with it, it's just amazing, heartwarming. You can see the benefits of the program. And my little pitch to you all, if you're not involved, please get involved. It's just amazing. I don't have enough time to go into that. So after Nicole, we're going to have Jared Holliday speak. Jared is a local structural engineer. He was the engineer of record on the Habitat projects. And he's going to share some local knowledge. He's been here for forever, basically. So you're going to see that. Rob Yates is going to speak on microfiber rebars and what advantages that presents within the ICF build. So just to take a step back, we at the NRMCA and our Build with Strength program, the reason we support ICF construction is it works along many different product types. It's fast, it provides energy efficiency, first cost. We're trying to take market share from the wood folks primarily. We can build it with low CO2 carbon emissions, so we're able to reduce your global warming potential. And again, it competes against wood, first cost, and then you see all the other benefits that concrete and the expanded stock polystyrene foam provides. So we're gonna get into that. Jared's gonna speak on that. From there, we're going to get into, and again, special thanks to Mike Dalzell in the back of the room with Fox Blocks. Fox donated. Matthews Ready Mix was the concrete supplier on the Habitat project. Mike and Fox Blocks provided the insulated concrete forms for the project, and Mike was the guy in the hole. And with Raul and Mike, I had never been in a hole before building ICFs. Steve Moses in the back of the room was there as well from the Chico State. It's easy on paper. When you get in the hole, there's all kinds of things coming up. And Mike was just amazing to work with and great in the hole. And thank you very much. And he's going to speak from there. We're going to have food trucks going to show up here at the site. We're going to have some lunch. We're going can go through, that'll give you all a chance then to meet, there's other ICF manufacturers in the room as well, and different folks and architects, and so you guys can interact and interface with those folks. Then we're gonna jump back on the bus, we're gonna tour some sites. Hopefully the rain will subside a little bit and give us a chance to get muddy. I have hard hats and safety vests for everyone, so that we'll have our PPE and we'll be safe. If you're interested in safety glasses, we have those as well. After the tour, we're gonna go back to the hotel, and that'll be the end of our day. So again, if there's any questions, comments along the way, please ask. We're super happy to have everyone here. If you haven't signed in, please sign in. If you haven't signed the waiver, please do that as well. So without further ado, ladies. Got that.
Good morning, everybody. We are so glad you're here, and thank you for bringing the rain with you because of the end of fire season. Yay! Oh my gosh, where is our? Should we open it up?
It was a great trip, by the way. That was sparkling water.
So, we are coming up on the 3rd anniversary of the campfire, November 8th, and recovery is going slow. And so, we're going to talk about that and why it's happening and what we're going to do to make it faster. Okay, so Amy Moore, Valley Contractors Exchange.
I'm Chelsea Irvine. I'm an independent community and economic development consultant working with Amy and Carrie on our mobile hands-on tools construction training program. So
That's what we're going to talk about. Yes. So Valley Contractors Exchange is a nonprofit, member-based association. We do not survive without our members. If you're not a member, you should join. So we're representing 350 North State contractors, suppliers, industry professionals that are behind this project. For me, this is really personal. I'm a camper myself. I don't like the term campfire survivor. We live in Big Creek Canyon, which is just a stone's throw that way. After the fire, I felt really hopeless and helpless and just, 98 pounds, most of my hair fell out. It was very stressful. I got house proper certified, so we lost our house, but my husband has a 1968 case backhoe that survived the fire as well as our dump trailer, and I have a skid steer named Miss Kitty. So we both got house offer certified, right? House offer certified, did our own cleanup, and then also did our neighbors' cleanup. They're in their 70s, so that really sucked. And then COVID happened, so we've got 2 teenage boys that were only in distance learning for 3 hours a day, so they got to come out and learn how to build a house. So that whole process for me was incredibly empowering. It took me from a place of just feeling like I lost everything to really empowered. And I feel like there's so many people in this community, and keep in mind, it's not just Paradise, right? Paradise is kind of the hub, but there's all these communities out there, Yankee Hill, Berry Creek, Concow. I mean, there are all these little communities out there that are really close-knit, and they need help. They need people to come in and help them. And mostly, we need people employed in construction. And so that's what this is all about. The number one barrier to rebuilding right now, we know, is workforce. I don't need to tell you guys anything. You know this. So we need to come out and empower people, get them trained, and employ you. So
Amy, just real quick, for those who don't know, can you do like the 1-minute recap of what it meant to be in your lot? What's involved in that? Because I think some folks don't know why there's such big.
Yeah, so it's physical. We had that's what we were left with. When we had our house, which was 2,700 square feet, we had so my husband's a general contractor, our shop and garage, and then another garage. So 3 things. And it was just navigating that process, wanting to keep the concrete on our shop because it was fine. And what does that look like? And getting the engineers out to talk about that, and Chico State to talk about that. So, it's just physically up every day going out and scooping up your life, your home, and all your belongings, and dumping it into a trailer, and wrapping it in a burrito, and it was just crazy. But we did that. So what is hands-on tools construction training? It's a 4x250 with a lumber rack, pulling a 24-foot trailer that's decked out as a mobile classroom and construction trailer. We're going to buy all the tools to build a house, And we're gonna go out into the community and do some good while we're training people.
So for those of you who aren't quite as familiar as others, the campfire is the deadliest fire in California history. It burned over 156,000 acres and caused the total loss of about 14,000 homes and damage to quite a few other homes. My former organization, 3Corps, which is the economic development district for this region, did a campfire regional economic impact analysis to kind of do a deep dive as to what were the economic impacts and how does this region recover. And the main takeaway from a year of putting that study together with these brilliant economic minds and data crunchers were that 95% of the businesses in Paradise and on the Ridge and unincorporated communities were local serving businesses, meaning that without a population here, those businesses cannot reopen and they cannot survive. So how do we solve that problem? Getting people up here, building houses. What's the biggest challenge to building houses? Workforce. There's all these bottlenecks in every single step of the construction workforce, and those need to be solved before we can even start talking about real long-term recovery and resiliency. And that's kind of where this project was born. Amy and Valley Contractors Exchange has had this dream of mobile construction training for years. Unfortunately, fortunately, with the fire, there are different funding sources that are coming to this region, and we're really happy that the federal government has stepped in and the state government has stepped in. And when we started talking about this project and using community development, block grant, disaster recovery funds to do this kind of project, those funds just go so slow that we're like, let's figure something else out and another way to get this show on the road, get this project moving. And fortunately, through our relationship with the Economic Development Administration, through the Federal Department of Commerce, we were asked to apply for grant funding at an 80% grant rate, where we only had a 20% match to get this program rolling and get this project off the ground and really make some headway as we wait for these other long, convoluted funding sources to come through. So there's some details about what we found and why this started, and then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty.
So it's a four-pronged approach. We're going to be in schools, right? So there's not a lot of construction-related classes in schools anymore. This whole generation has gone by, and I think that that's why, for every 5 contractors who retire, 1 takes their place. Because if you're not born into the trades, where do you start? You're certainly not learning it in school. So working with youth organizations like the Boys and Girls Club and continuation schools, and we're doing this work now. We go into schools, we physically put their kids' hands on tools, have them build something fun, teach them about construction, and the fact that it is it's not just swinging a hammer, right? It's heavy equipment operation, it's everything in between. It's landscaping, it's roofing, it's plumbing, it's electrical, it's all that. So just teaching them what it is and letting them know the opportunities that are available to them. And then industry-recognized NCCR core curriculum. We're going to upskill train in 4 specific areas where we know are bottlenecks, and then industry-required safety trainings to keep our people local so they don't have to go to Sacramento to get trained. So, in schools, and like I said, we're doing this now. So we do construction camps with CAR, Chico Area Recreation District. We're doing an event with PRPD. Just anything we can do to get kids' hands on tools and have them build. And so these case studies here, we did our first construction camp with the Boys and Girls Club, and this family wrote a letter. They have 2 boys in there that were also campers, and just the difference they saw in their children. It's so empowering. We're doing electrical trainings where we frame up walls and we take them into different organizations, continuation schools, and have the kids wire them, cut in the holes, put the wires, mount the panel, change out plugs and switches. Women can do this, right? So I should back up. I was born in construction, right? So, and I'm in my 40s now. My dad is a builder. I spent all my summers on the job site. Nobody told me I could be a contractor. So we really just need to let women know. We're 51% of the population in construction, we're 2%. And we need to start thinking differently as an industry. And I feel like this generation now is waking up to that. I actually do get to work in the field 2 days a week. I'm at BCE 30 hours, and that is just my heart and soul, and I love it. And everybody needs to be exposed to it. I mean, where do you begin if you're not going into it? So, kids, they're awesome. Baby Girls Build Camp, they were amazing. So much fun.
Well, and not only is Amy doing these Girls Build Camp with young people, she's also started a Women in Construction group here in Chico that's kind of building upon, the Chico State group. And that group has already gotten together and done a She Lit That event where they learned how to, do a light switch and that kind of thing. Because we forget that even as adults, there's something empowering about being able to fix stuff around your house. And it's just been really great, and that group is growing exponentially in the last few months since it started. And of course, we would be remiss if we didn't mention and the incredible experience we had putting together the houses on Garden View Lane. So I had the pleasure, as I mentioned yesterday, of being with Mike and Greg and Patrick and everybody for the first 2 builds, and being bossed around from every angle from everyone. And it was such a great experience, and it really showed how volunteer friendly ICFs are, and how fun it is to put the Legos together and do the clips and all this stuff. And then the next time when we worked on Jennifer's house recently, a few weeks ago, Amy got to come out, and as you can see us there, professionals, right, in our workout, in our construction outfits, as always. So we got to be there, and that was actually, interestingly enough, one of the very few, if not only, days on a job site where we had a good number of volunteers, and the bulk of them were women. And we got a lot of stuff done that day, and I'm not sure if those 2 facts are really connected or not, but I think maybe.
We got so much done, we ran out of blocks, man.
Yeah, we ran out of material because we were going so fast, and Raul did a great job bossing us around, as always. But it was just a great experience, and this is the cool thing about our mobile construction training, is that because we're not directly affiliated with a higher education institution, we can pivot, and if there's some cool, innovative stuff coming down the pipe, like ICFs or the 3D printer that Chico State is working on, we can take the trailer out there and show people, because without innovation and creativity, this rebuild is not going to happen. And especially when we talk about being environmentally friendly and worrying about those kinds of things, we have to be able to show young people and people interested in the trades that there are a lot of cool things going on. And as I mentioned yesterday, if anybody wants the 411 encyclopedia on ICF, I say talk to Moses, because I have been so incredibly impressed with his knowledge about this stuff. And that's the exciting thing, is you can start people when they're 19, 20, 21 learning about this stuff and really creating the next generation of construction, doing construction, really.
All right, so in to recognize 80-hour NCC or core curriculum, really we have to do a certificate to meet our grant funding. But anyways, it's going out into the communities in the Burn Stars, going into Yankee Hill or Berry Creek or wherever, identifying who's the heart of that community, seeing what they need done, and saying, great, if you can bring me at least 2 people to certify an NCCR core curriculum, then we will come, bring the truck, the trailer, and the materials to do this community project, do good. Or make sense to volunteer builds that are out there. Just get their hands on tools, teach them about construction, teach them how fun it is, empower them, and get them trained and employed. And you guys are all contractors. I know when you're driving around in your truck and you've got somebody in the truck with you and you drive by at something that you built, even if you told them 20 times before, I built that, you're saying it again, right? And I feel like in the community that can spread too. So maybe the first time we only get 2 people, but by the time those 2 people are telling everybody in their community when they pass this, I did that, when we come back around the second time, maybe we'll get 5 people. Because, it's catchy.
And I have to admit, there's a gate that I build on East 20th Street where every time I drive by Sierra Nevada, I was like, that gate looks nice, don't you think? People are like, it's a gate, like, chill out. And now I notice everybody else's nice fences, so as an added bonus.
And like Chelsea said, since we're not an institution, and keep in mind, these people, they're food insecure, they're housing insecure, they're dealing with their own PTSD. We need to empower them to help themselves. And they can't go to traditional universities or to be in college for these trainings. We need to go to them. We need to think differently, because what we're doing is not working.
Well, and like Patrick said, especially on these volunteer builds, there's something different about helping somebody else have that feeling of empowerment, helping somebody else rebuild their homes. And there's an army of people who want to come out here and volunteer and help this community get back to some sense of normalcy. And this mobile construction training is really going to do that. And I highly recommend, anybody who wants to volunteer at Habitat, and the biggest advocate for that. Also, if you ever have an opportunity to go to a home dedication, talk about pulling on your heartstrings. And, I would invite you all to come out here when we do our dedications on Garden View Lane, because those families are just incredible, and there won't be a dry eye in the house.
So I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It takes 22 trades to build a house, but it's really just educating people out there about what construction is. Our little fingers are great, and we get in small places. Women can, like electricians, plumbers, what great trades those are. The other thing we're going to do is upskill training in 4 known bottlenecks in construction. I'm not telling you that you don't know. Concrete finishing, right? All hands on deck on concrete day. And most of the finishers, except there's a guy in a sweatshirt here that's definitely under the age of 70. He's got a concrete finishing. But we're like all our finishers are in their 70s. And we're like, come on, let's go. So we need to teach you about what it is to finish concrete. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the MEPs. There are 4 volunteer build organizations active up here in Paradise. All of them sub that out. So if we can identify industry curriculum, short, quick, what do you want your entry-level workers to know in those particular trades, and then go and do that work in the community for the benefit of all of us, right? And train and get people employed.
Well, and a big dream of mine, my first day on the job site with Habitat was in Sacramento on Women Build Day, and I somehow weaseled myself onto the electrical crew. And the unique thing about the affiliate in Sacramento is that their electrical crew is 100% volunteer. So they do from rough-in to the final light fixtures and ceiling fans and all that, and it's completely volunteer. And so it's kind of one of my dreams to replicate that out here and have these, maybe retired electricians teach the new generation, because I know the first time that I hooked up a light switch and turned it on and it worked was just the biggest moment of my entire life. It's just the dorkiest thing, but I think I talked about it for like 3 weeks afterwards, and now, of course, every time I have to talk about it again. But we can replicate that. It's just a matter of having the tools and the expertise to have those kinds of programs going.
And I'm so doing that right now. I emailed a retired electrician. I've got like 10 contacts now. I'm bringing that group together. I'm doing that, Nicole. So
Exactly.
All right. And then the last thing we're going to do is just industry recognized safety trainings. You guys know this. When you're using specialized equipment, you have to be trained in that. A lot of these trainings are people have to go to Sacramento or McKinleyville or do it online, and let's be honest, you don't want to do it online. So keep them local, keep them productive, and keep them trained and safe. So again, just going to introduce you. We're going to upskill, we're going to train, we're going to get them employed. We need to build our workforce. We absolutely need to get these houses rebuilt, and all of you should build a spec house. I'm just saying that right now. Lots are cheap, go build a spec house. So
On brand with that one.
all right.
And so here's where everybody says, okay, where are you with this project? And besides us going and doing our dog and pony show and introducing this to the community, we are thrilled to say that we have conditional approval from the Economic Development Administration to purchase the truck, the trailer, the equipment, the tools, the supplies, everything we need. And North Valley Community Foundation and Root Strong Fund has generously offered to cover our grant match and 3 years of a full-time instructor. We still have a little bit of funding we're trying to secure to hire a part-time administrative support person and run the program fully for the first 3 years. We're just on the cusp of getting there. We want to thank Golden Valley Bank and the Chico Chamber of Commerce for their support as well. If any of you have foundations that are looking for places to make donations to, we brought a big bag and you just dump the checks in there. But as soon as we're on the very, very cusp of being able to purchase the truck, the trailer, the tools, all the things that get this show on the road. But we're also always looking for community support, local projects. We know for sure we're going to be working with the chamber and other organizations up here on the ridge to, like Amy said, get in on a build or go build some bleachers at the baseball stadium or any of those things. So support is always welcome. If you want more information, if you want to dump a bucket of money towards a project, we're happy to take it. And just thank you for listening and for being a part of what's happening up here. And we appreciate you guys and we appreciate the time.
And Chelsea's being really humble because in 5 months she's raised almost $700,000. So.
We love doing this. I just had an epiphany moment on my way here this morning. Because I was like, why do we just get along so well? Why do I care so much about this? And I realized that the only reason that I was in Sacramento was that my dad moved there because he had a construction company. And like why that never dawned on me and why I'm so like into Habitat and these things is not only from working in disaster recovery for 5 years, but just having that background in my family. And it's exciting to me to be able to be a change that will really have an impact on the community. And I really would highly recommend all of you guys coming back, mixing in on a volunteer build, getting to know this community because it really will have a place in your heart. That's it. That's all I got. Thank you, everyone.
Humanity's gonna come up now.
Yeah.
Do the slide? Slide down?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I don't know, that's been pretty hard for me to follow. I don't be able to do that. That enthusiasm. So, I'm Nicole Bateman with Habitat for Humanity of Butte County, and I'm the executive director. And I have a number of my staff here today. Raul is also going to be coming up a little bit later to talk about his experience actually building the ICF houses that we did. We also have Moses, who is with Chico State, and we just hired him recently. Raise your hand back there, and with Raul. And then we also have Elizabeth, who actually is one of our newest employees. She's our homeowner support person. And then Elena here is our construction director. And then, and also have, and I don't know if Chelsea said this, but Chelsea's also on my board of directors. So, so we have a good group here today from Habitat. So thank you all for being here today and participating in this. Let's see here. I have that under. Okay. Wow. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about where we are up here in Paradise and what Habitat is doing. But as I mentioned, Raul will come up and talk more. When he's talking, you're probably going to be more interested in what he's saying because he's actually going to talk about the experience that he had with building ICF houses. So our mission is bringing people together to build homes, community, and hope. And I love this picture. I love this picture. This was the day that she got the keys to her house. And this was like pure joy. I mean, I was crying because they know it's not dry eye. She was just so happy. And her coach says, I'm looking forward to seeing what will come from this new perspective that I have in mind. The fact that I've been able to provide this opportunity for my child is overwhelming. It really makes me feel like I'm a true parent. So anyway, this is a great day that we had with her. So after the campfire, we knew that we needed to do more building. Before that time, we were just building 2 houses a year in our community. And we know that isn't enough now. And our goal now is to build 8 to 10 houses a year. And our focus is going to be Paradise. And this project right here is actually one that we did in Chico on Mulberry Street. We just finished that project just at the beginning of this year here. And these are 6 houses, and 5 of those were for campfire survivors. So even before the fire and before COVID, the need for housing was critical in our area, and now it's even more urgent. And Habitat is committed to doing our part to getting as many affordable housing built as we can in our community. Patrick?
I see.
Big bucks.
Okay, you're going to recognize his next picture. They come up. But it's not shifting. Sorry. I'm the worst at person.
You kick it.
I know.
What's the size of ADU?
That was it's 9. Yeah.
The houses were
Those were 12. Yeah. And that project we actually had 3 bedrooms. We had 2 that were 2 bedrooms and 1 that was 1 bedroom. So yeah, those were our first ADU projects that we've done. It was super exciting. We actually were the contractors.
How long did it take to start finish?
It took, because of the COVID time, because of the supply, it took a while. It took us probably 9 months to get those done. Yeah.
All of it?
Yeah.
All on there?
No, in this particular one, we actually used a contractor to get us to jump start. We actually used Mello to get us jump started, and then we had to build Yes. Yeah, because we actually, before the fire, we had a half-time construction person, and that was it. So we knew we needed to build up, and so we needed to bring somebody else. Yeah. Okay, well, I think I'll just, that's right, let's go on. So, as we thought about what would have more of an impact on the community, we were actually approached by Habitat International, as well as the National Ready-Mix Concrete Association, to see if we would be interested in building with concrete. And I have to say that, honestly, we were a little nervous about this opportunity. We had only done stick builds before, and so we really thought, can we truly do this? Can we make this shift? And so we had to seriously consider it, and we talked with, we had Patrick here, and then we also had Greg, who was with his national offices, and then Mike, who you've already met, that we were talking with as we talked about, can we truly make this transition? And as we knew that we needed support in order to do this, as I mentioned, we were a pretty small affiliate. We are in the midst of growing right now, but we were small, so we know we need
Melanie says hello.
Very persistent.
I guess that's it.
Where'd you get the hat?
Where'd she get the what?
The hat.
Concentrate.
It's very fresh.
Okay, well, this is the picture of you. That we can go there.
All right.
Now look at Mike. This is when he was in the hole. This is when he was, yeah. He was a little bit.
Alan Keller's mother was running. I kind of worried about that.
Okay. So, okay, let me go to the next one. So as we were, as we were considering what we could conclude, we knew we needed support to do this. And ultimately, we wanted to build, the safest houses that we could, and we want houses that were fire resistant. And National Ready-Mix Concrete Association was committed to making sure that this would be a successful build for us, even though we were in our growth spurt right now. And they actually provided in-kind materials for us, and they also did support, which really meant training, which is what we needed. We needed to know what we were doing out there. So they came out and worked with us on our building the forms up, and on for a full week in May, actually, they were out there with us, which was great. And I have to say, too, that I think that their goal, the National Ready-Mix Concrete Association goal, was to build 50 ICF houses in 50 states. And I said, well, we're building 3 in Paradise right now. And they didn't hesitate one bit and said, we'll help you with all 3 of them. So we totally appreciate their support with us for doing that project. So then these just like Chelsea and Amy, there's a ton of people that go into making this happen for us. We really are, our model's based on partnerships. It's also based on volunteerism. So these are all the folks. We had local and national people that helped us build these first 3 houses on Garden View Lane that we're still in the process of. So this is a huge amount of people. And a lot of this too is the in-kind materials that we had gotten from various sources, a lot from the National Ready-Mix Concrete Association, which we really appreciate. And then these are the families that Chelsea was talking about. These are 3 houses on Garden View. They're all these families are all long-term residents of Paradise. They have deep roots here. They're looking forward to getting back to their hometown again and to helping to rebuild it. 2 of them are single moms, and they both happen to have 12-year-old boys, so they'll be able to play in the cul-de-sac down there. And the other family is a mom and an adult son living together, and the mom is deaf, so he is her caretaker. And they all have communicated they're going to feel safe in these houses, and we know these houses will provide stability for these families building, you know, to their futures, which is really what Habitat is about, is giving people a hand up so that they can think about their futures as they go along. So this right here is, we've been really fortunate to get a number of grants, and one particularly from the North Valley Community Foundation, the Strong Foundation, to be able to purchase lots up here in Paradise. And so currently we have 15 lots, and 3 of them have been donated, which actually really helps us a lot so that we can keep the prices of the houses down. We are continuing to accept lot donations, and we continue to look for different lots in town, especially ones that are close to shopping and schools and parks. And so our goal, as I mentioned, is to build 8 to 10 houses a year, so we actually have to have the lots and be able to do that. So we're finishing up on Garden View early this next year, and then we're going to be starting on 4 homes in the next couple months. 2 on Academy, and 1 on Edwards, and 1 on Ripley. So those are our next projects. So now I'm going to have Raul come up and just talk about, you'll probably be more interested in what he's saying about his actual experience with doing ICF houses.
Hi guys, I'm Raul. I think most of you were at Nick's last night, right? Yeah. I thought about what I could add. Most of you are contractors. I was hoping there'd be homeowners here. But for me, preparing to build, when I was asked if I wanted to try this, I've been a carpenter and a concrete guy since '91. That's all I knew. This ICF build was foreign, and I had to really wrap my head around it. I did the Fox Blocks training online. I printed out a manual. I read that thing several times, but I still really didn't know how to, they described it as building Legos. So just the whole thing was foreign until that first day when we had everything there and Mike led us. So it truly is a clean, fast process to build. We, in 2 days, I think I told you, we had 2 houses up, blocked, and on the 3rd day we were reinforcing the openings. The fourth day we were pouring concrete. So to meet our 6 to 10 homes per year, I'm thinking we might be able to do that with using ICFs as to get it done fast. Their building with ICFs is easy. It's not the framing, lifting walls. The blocks are light. It's very user-friendly. That aspect for homeowners, if a homeowner wanted to build a house and they only have certain money to cover materials, I would lead them towards the ICF way, because they could learn to build those blocks faster than they could learn to frame and everything involved about framing. The bracing system that you use for the blocks, you're taking out the plumbing and lining that you have to do with frames, and that's a skill in itself. Plumbing and lining your walls. With the blocks, you're eliminating nailing shear. Again, if you're not a skilled tradesman, pounding nails or using a gun nail could be tricky. So I'm behind it because it is user-friendly. So after it's user-friendly, so after the first 2, Mike left me. There was no one there to hold my hand. It was just me and my pamphlet to do the 3rd one. I really wasn't sweating it. I was looking forward to it, and with the help of Amy, Chelsea, Moses, the rest of a group of the homeowners, we taught them the homeowners that you saw, they were there piecing the third house together. It went well. That third house, we got the walls up a few weeks ago. The trusses are rolled, sheeted, felted in. The homeowners enjoyed the experience. So that for me was proof that someone, a family up on the ridge, if they wanted to do-it-yourself type build, this is very user-friendly. It's easy. Do you have any questions for me on anything on ICF builds? Not that I'm an expert. Well, you know what? Mike Dalzell did say that I was an expert now.
Thanks for the $5, by the way.
That's pretty much all I wanted to say. And this is coming from, oh, go ahead.
Well, what are the impediments? Why isn't every Habitat house down here built with ICF?
I have to say that it's new to us. We just did, we're working on the first 3. I will see where that goes. Probably Nicole would be one to answer that, and it probably involves around money. So
I actually just asked the Sacramento affiliate about that yesterday, and the reason that they aren't implementing this is because they have their construction scheduled out through 2025. So it'll be after that they'd even think about it.
at any rate, for me, I'm behind ICF bills. It's fast, it's safe, and for us, you get to involve volunteers. It's user-friendly. If you don't have any questions, that's it for me. Today,
Are you guys using the helix, or are you tying your horizontal bars?
we are using helix, and I think someone is here to talk about that. The helix helped tremendously because we were able to eliminate all of our horizontal rebar. So when you're doing that pour, when your walls are up doing the pour, we did it in 3 lifts. So that allowed the pump, the hose, to get down and fill the first lift, then the second, then the third. We went around there 3 times. If we had rebar, horizontal rebar through that, we wouldn't have been able to do that as easy. We would have had problems doing that. So the helix is amazing. Jared will tell you, he'll be up here talking about removing the rebar and adding this product. Metal fibers, amazing. Any other questions?
Bro, you mentioned stacking to reinforcing, pouring the walls 4 days or so. How does that compare to what you guys would typically do on stick frame?
Okay. Time-wise, with volunteers, to do walls, it's probably a 2-week process, maybe even longer. Because you've got people coming out that never really used a tool, a hammer. So now you're actually teaching them how to drive a nail through wood. That in itself is difficult. So to do a simple 900 square foot house like ours, to frame that would be about 2 weeks, maybe even more, just to frame the walls and lift them, and then now you have to shear them. So it's time-wise, the stick frame, wood frame takes a lot longer. I like it for the ease. I'm an old man, and even lifting an 8-foot wall with one header in it is a little bit heavy.
Sorry.
Stacking blocks And using that reinforcement system takes about 4 trades out of the issue. I like all of that, and again, it's very user-friendly. I hope to do more ICFs. They're fun. Okay, if no other questions, thanks for listening.
Now, we'll see where this goes.
Yeah. Me in charge of technology.
Do you have a slide or anything? You're just gonna nail us?
Yeah.
In that case, I'll put a picture of my back up.
You got any of the shots? Because I'm kind of tired of this.
I'd have been drinking.
So next up, we're going to have Jared Holliday with Rancho Engineering. Jared is the engineer of record for the Habitat project, based here in Paradise, long history in the community. It's all of you. Thanks, Jared.
All right, so I wasn't sure exactly what audience was going to be today, so we have some contractors. So I'll go a little bit light on the design side of it, numbers-wise, and following my presentation, it's going to be a little more in-depth presentation on using the microfiber reinforcements. So I'll be just kind of touching on how we convert from there. But a little backstory on me: lived up here for the last 22 years. Been in engineering that whole time, doing ICF houses here and there since about the first year of that. Initially, it seemed like ICF homes at that point were more for the energy efficiency side of things. And with recent history, the benefits of the fire. The safety that comes from the ICF is really keeping me as a benefit. So, fortunately, through the fire, my office is actually downtown where one of the few buildings that made it. I don't know if on the blog, but it's about we have it rebuilt, but we are back up here once again. And through that process, we were approached by Rebuild Paradise Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization here in town, who has multitude of ways that they've been helping out the society, but one of them was coming up with a master plan program that provided free to reduce cost plans to folks trying to rebuild up here on the hill. One of the opportunities we had was to join in and provide the structural engineering on a 960 square foot, 2-bedroom, 2-bath home that the Chico State architecture students, along with Design SI, which was an architect who kind of oversaw the project for them. Ruben, who's the architect of Design SI, also teaches at college. So he mentored them, they created the house plan, and then we provided engineering on that for the program. Fast forward from there, last year we were approached by Habitat for Humanity to see if we would be willing to work with them for the 3 homes that are in Garden View to provide those master plans for them as an ease and a speedy way for them to move forward with those builds. After the initial discussions with them, came to be that the National Ready Mix Association volunteered to donate materials if we were able to get the home switched over to ICF. And so then, after talks with that seemed feasible, we ended up reworking the design for those homes to ICF. Through the process, ended up having concrete donated, forms donated, helix set up with the microfiber reinforcing, as well as concrete tile roofing. So it was a pretty extensive redesign of the home with added weight on the roof and such. But as we've found and as we've done in the past, really it's not a tough conversion to go from a house plan that was originally designed with wood don't know, but the concrete shear walls have huge strength value to them. So it doesn't take a lot of concrete shear wall to handle the shear forces that we're looking at for seismic and wind loading, especially for our region here. So if we could just get a few good qualifying chunks of wall, similar to we do with wood shear walls, this lateral system in the house works out well. There are some constraints. For this particular case, we had 9-foot plate height, smaller wall. We're able to utilize a 6-inch core wall. With that 6-inch core, code then has requirements for length to height ratios, thickness to height ratios, thickness to length ratios. So it breaks down basically into four different situations. You have basically, in our particular case, with our 6-inch walls, 9-foot plate height, we ended up that we had 36 inches length of shear wall, that we didn't have any special reinforcing. We could just design no increases in shear forces, nothing special there. Design for our vertical and horizontal reinforcement. If you start getting into shorter shear walls, you start entering into an area that's considered a shear piers. Now, this just sounds fancy, it's just starting to get shorter. Requires a little more design work, a little more reinforcing if you want to utilize those shorter wall segments. Not that you can't use them. In our particular case here, we have plenty of wall lines that we didn't have to go into that realm. But as you get into custom homes, you have shorter shear walls, things like that, you can accomplish that using the tighter reinforcing. There's different categories of that. It goes all the way down to where you have a length of wall to thickness of wall ratio less than 2.5. Once you hit there, it's essentially considered a column. It goes into extensive reinforcing detailing. Not that it can't be done, but it takes a lot more work to perform and such. When we finished through our design, we went through, came up with a standard reinforcement required for our typical walls, typical shear walls. That was a number 4 rebar at 16 inches on center horizontal, 18 inches on center vertical. Once we were at that point, had our shear numbers, we then worked with the engineers at Helix to come up with a mixed design using Helix microfibers to replace that common reinforcing. Our end result was a mix of 18 pounds of the microfiber reinforcing mixed in at the plant per cubic yard to be a direct replacement of that common reinforcement for the walls. With that done, you get the time savings, labor savings of tying all that common bar as you're building these walls up out there in the field. Not to say that you get to remove all the reinforcing. We still have our boundary reinforcing, 2 number 5 bars around all of our openings, in the walls, and as our core bar around the top. But that is a great reduction in time and very minimal in comparison to.
What about above your doors and windows, your ventils above that? Above that, are they stacked with these?
You know, in this particular situation, we had a 960 square foot home, very lightly loaded with the roofing.
Cool.
No openings. I think our largest opening was 5 foot.
Oh, okay.
And 9-foot plates, we ended up with a good, I think we had 2.5, 3 feet of lintel over the top there. 2 number 5s were happy.
2 number 5.
Yeah, so there wasn't anything special needed.
I wish I had that.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, if you start getting into the longer spans, heavier loads, certainly. Yeah, you have heavier stirrups in there for your reinforcing of those beams, maybe more reinforced.
So wouldn't the Helix kind of maybe cut back on that?
The Helix will help with that,
Yeah,
yes.
it's going to have to add as many.
Yeah, and in this particular case, we were really lightly loaded. A lot of the lighter residential, smaller windows, things like that, you would be in the same situation. But if you were getting larger, you would then account for that.
That's where all of our labor's coming in. These are the windows that we build above doors and windows. Just takes forever.
Yeah, that, as you're getting into column design, shear piers, all the additional reinforcing, just takes so much labor and time trying to fit that all in there, tie it all in. Not that you can avoid that all the time. You know, I mean, if you get into custom homes, there just isn't a route around it. You know, customer really needs these window packages, door packages, and wants to get their view, you're going to have some structural reinforcement for sure. These are simpler homes, and a lot of residential homes that we're seeing coming back in, they're shooting for the more of a affordable build side of things, and keep it pretty streamlined, especially with the forces that we have here. You know, as you travel out elsewhere, you might get some higher amplification forces with seismic. You might run into some more. One other element that comes in with doing this design is you do end up with outerplane forces for your walls, for your ties to your diaphragms, for floors, for roofs, that you don't necessarily have with conventional wood framing. Again, nothing too extreme in this particular case. We had just a different style of clip to clip the roof trusses that were making a full span behind the walls, side to side, looking that way. So we have been in some other situations. I look at Kenny here. Kenny Young is one of my engineers. Where we end up with higher forces, we need to pay attention to strapping a little bit more, maybe opening some collector members to pull the forces of those walls so they don't go out of plane into that diaphragm. Just an additional step that we can look at. That we don't necessarily look at too much. For this home, we also looked at we have the slab on grade. So we replaced all of our column and bar reinforcing in that slab as well. Came up with a mixed design at 13.5 pounds per cubic yard of the helix. Actually, a helix 525 was the exact reinforcing that we used. Again, no reinforcing tie. Prep your slab, have it ready. Your reinforcements coming out right there before your concrete. Finish it, you're done. So just labor savings. Strength that you get out of it is just awesome.
How the measures like working with helix makes.
You know, I'd have to ask Raul.
Is that no problems? It came out pretty good. Nothing's surfaced.
Yeah, I didn't hear any complaints, but I don't always hear everything. So yeah, so that's So then moving kind of past that, my office does more than just the structural engineering. We'll do energy calculations. Well, we do a little of everything being up here on the top. We're a small town engineer, so we do septic design. We have lots of that up here. Energy calculations, full plan production. But just kind of want to touch on the energy side of things. We've had multiple jobs now that we've gotten to work on that have been designed as wood and as ICF. Running energy calculations, just purely switching out the exterior walls from, say, a 2x6 with R23 in it, to, in this particular case, 6-inch core ICF. We're getting about 12-13% increase in efficiency just by switching those exterior walls out. No other change in materials at all. Everything's same except for that. That's basically the equivalent of the credit that we get right now for putting in the minimal solar required on the homes within the code. And so it's huge on the energy side of it when you get just by switching to the product. I can't believe how quiet the homes are when you're walking in there. I'm a fan. We've done quite a few really nice customs. They seem to build well. We haven't had any issue. And as people get creative, we learn more and more what we can do with this. So the last item, just to touch on a little bit, many different techniques for putting these together at times. Whether you want to come in, as you saw in some of the pictures here, our initial couple of homes, we came in, poured footings first, formed up, put the walls in, poured them, and then came in and poured slabs interior. Energy efficiency wise, you get that thermal break between your slab and foundation. However, that takes a little bit more work. You're kicking off to brace your walls to dirt, gives you a little bit of movement possibly there to keep an eye on, and having to finish the slabs within the walls. think on the final one, did you guys switch on, or the last two?
No, just the final.
Just the last one, we actually switched to pouring
Slab on grade.
slab on grade first
Yeah.
and building off of that.
Yes.
It really lends to aiding on the construction side of it, having a good spot to work off of, brace off of. We've done it both ways, just depending on what folks are after. But it just seems to really give a good platform to work off, help you level up a little bit easier to get going. Same thing as far as tying roofs, tying floors, multiple ways of doing that. Family is a construction family. I have dad's contractor, all of and I know everybody does it different. So we'll guess at how maybe someone would want to do it, and then she never surprises me and get approached with another version or another way of doing it. So, but if it works and numbers work, we'll adjust and move along with that. And that's what we've done here with Habitat, is follow that along. So, that's kind of in a nutshell what we did here with this one. We've done many of these different block products, different systems similar.
We're going to see any of your designs on tour today that you did?
I think we're going to the Habitat homes first, so we'll see that. One that that's not on the tour, it's a finished home, it's a really nice custom. Just as you're leaving town on Skyway, on the right-hand side, it's a modern-looking flat roof.
They do concrete roof on that?
That one there is actually a TPO roof. Has the all the fascia around it is like a weathered, rusted metal.
What's the color of the house?
So like 410.
It's green.
Yeah, and so as you head in out, yeah, it's one of the last ones right on the right. Nice flat roof looking over the canyon right there. It's it'll catch your eye if you're looking for it there. But that was a really neat one that had. We actually ended up going with 8-inch blocks there. I think some of those clear story in the center, that's 20-something feet, and it's just really unique.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if there's any consideration to be had that they do like somewhat on cold joints for multiple floors.
Yeah, what we did have rebar stubs at our cold joint between foundation and wall, and so I would have to address that. As looking to have cold joints, we did we did bring this but continuous pour, just not to fill all at once on the forms, but yeah, we could address that. But for our true cold right there at the bottom, we're really good connection to get all of our shear transfer we did on our number 4 stuff forms.
Yes.
Can I ask, what's the exposure that you considered for, because everything's all burnt out and there's nothing around?
Oh, we figure that everything's wide open, no trees. Yeah, so we don't take the exposure B up in here anymore.
So if you were building in a more urban environment, you could have reduced your loads by having...
Certainly on the wind side,
Yeah.
I think in this particular case, we're seismic government? I'm not remembering it.
In one direction.
Yeah, because this was a long rectangle, so yeah, we had wind governed in the one direction, seismic in the other. And so yeah, certainly if you were down in an urban area, if you're not sitting right up here on top where we're at, you could account for that. And then you're just dealing with your seismic loading. Okay.
Great question.
I feel like the master plans, if you could expand on that for this group, 'cause I feel like that's really making a difference when
I'd
you
love
deliver
to.
a building. How
Yeah.
many do you have right now, and how many are ICF, and how can we get more ICFs? I think that's how we could build more ICFs.
Certainly.
Master plans.
Yeah. Personally, I have 3. I'll go with the names. The Flumes is this particular house that we're talking about today. We have the stick-built version and a ICF version of it. A couple of different options on roofs, things like that in there. So we have those. We have just a standard 2-car garage. It seemed to be a big need that we donated. Have a 1,600 something square foot 3-bedroom 2-bath that is in there. Getting ready to go into plan check on a new 3-bedroom 2-bath that's 1,200. I think it's just over 1,200 square foot. Trying to meet different needs. Design it narrow. A lot of our lots up here are small. Trying to get house on these skinny lots and septic. Your typical house that we had presented to the master plan program so far has been a little bit more square and boxy, and it's been tough on some of the smaller lots. And making those with options so that they can be 2 bedrooms and not necessarily have to be a 3-bedroom. Again, septic requirements that we're dealing with up here. So those are the ones that we have. There's a little 1-bedroom ADU, 650 square feet that is in the plan. There's another 1,800 square foot. I think that is 2 different options of that. One is a 3-bedroom, one has a 2-bedroom with a den. A couple other smaller sizes, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. That is Hope House 3. That I think is 1,100 square foot. I think Habitat is looking at building that. That same designer has Hope House 2, which is a 960 square foot, same size as ours. 2-bedroom, 2-bath, just a little different style to it. There is a nice ranch house that's in there. Do you remember how many square feet?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think it's 3-bedroom, 2-bath also.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. It's got options of having full wraparound porch, attached garage with a breezeway or no garage. And that's one of the things that we did with our new 1,200 square foot home is option to have the garage or not have it. I think there is one more, another Hemlock. I'm not recalling. I think it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And I like, there's another one on top of that, the Blue Oak, which is 2-bedroom, 2-bath, which we didn't intend. So had an architect out of Berkeley donate that to the plan, and then we did the design work or the engineering work on it. So there's quite a few on there. I think there's a couple more coming. We have one in the works. I know some other folks. It's a really neat program. Part of that is that Rebuild Paradise has taken on the learning of flying drones, capturing imagery, working with drone deploy, and then being able to provide for all of us designers high definition imagery and the data files that we can create all the topos for the sites. And so what we've been doing, we've been utilizing it by going out ahead of time, marking all the known utilities where we want things in the field, then go and have them apply it and pull it right into CAD. Everything's right there laid out as we discussed with the owners, and we're able to pull together. Well, one of the big things is septic. We have as-bills from the town. It says that septic is right here. Back in the 70s, contractors really didn't care what they were doing when they were doing the as-bills on the plans, and they may or may not know exactly where that's at. We're able to, most of the time, locate those ahead of time, mark them, so when we're flying, we know exactly where that's at on the plan. We're running into issues with folks going out digging their foundations and finding their septic tanks. So that's not the time you want to do that. But it's an evolving program with them. It's been really helpful for folks. Some of the designers are completely donated their plans for free. If you want them, they just give you a reuse letter. Others, I think, are with providing a custom site plan with the plan. It's $1,400, $1,500, something like that, for the use of the plan. But it took us a little bit to get that off the ground. Real learning experience for all of us to figure out how to even get that going and how to work with ownership, master plans with the town and the Paradise, and we have all those dual permitted so that you can build anywhere within the campfire burn star. But just learning how to navigate all that, because typically that had been a program utilized by contractors, and then the ownership of that plan was by the contractor. These particular situations, there wasn't anyone really have ownership of, but the designers wanted to keep control of them and know where they're being used and how. And so we actually have ownership in that sense in these particular days. Any other questions?
I forgot to ask you every time, what was the like compressive strength on the concrete?
Oh, I had that in my notes. We went with 3,000 PSI.
Okay.
So nothing too far out of the ordinary, a little more than normal. But that was what worked best with working with, well, recommended by the Helix engineers for use of their product.
Sure, thank you very much. So it is the middle of the workday, so I was thinking that we would take a little break. Now, I just wanted to, again, introduce Brandon Ray. For you folks, he, again, is our California person. And I wanted to touch on the Concrete Design Center, which is a free service that the NRMCA offers. So if you have project plans and you're interested in converting that, and you're interested to see what the cost would be to convert from wood to concrete, it's a free service. You can email those plans to Brandon, and what you're going to get is a breakdown of first cost. We're going to give you some engineering opportunities. We're going to look at energy savings. We're going to look at operating costs, and we're going to provide that for you in a very easy, concise form to use. And again, it's free of charge for you to use. And as you can see here, we're going to show and tell you how it works. It's free, depending on, we're focusing on ICF today, but in some of our other applications, we'll look at tilt up and cast in place and other forms of concrete construction. And we're going to provide you what we think is the best case solution. In some parts of the country, that could be CMU even. So we're going to provide that information to you. Brandon can help walk you through the process, and the sooner and the earlier you are in the project phase, get those to us, because what we don't want to do is replicate your cost to redesign projects. So again, get with Brandon and he'll help you out. Robert Yates. Yes, sir. He's going to speak to us a little more on micro reinforcing. So Robert, I'm going to...
All right, go ahead. Thank you. I appreciate it, you guys. My name is Rob Yates. I'm a civil engineer out of Rosedale, California. And I have been in private consulting most of my career. And then I worked for Cemex as a paving engineer, which is fun. Did a lot of promotion around the western part of the country. And then I worked for a fiber company, which is also really cool. Synthetic fiber company. Don't hate me, Dennis. Sorry. And then after that, I just started my own consulting firm to do basically fiber reinforced concrete design. So if that's even a thing, like I specialize in something that most people don't even know exists. So, you know, like in some jobs, you have a specialty engineer that does the like tilt wall panels, or some of the design is very unique. So that, I guess that's what I am. Is I'm kind of like a specialty engineer for fiber reinforced concrete. It's a composite, so it's a little tricky. And so I just consult to, I have 4 different fiber companies that are my clients. They'll send me design work that needs to get stamped, reviewed, things like that. So I'll redesign it, like run side-by-side calcs, and just make sure their software is on point. And I'm registered in 40 states, and I'm trying to get to 50. So I'm very valuable to some of these fiber companies because they have projects all over the place. And that's been one of my strategies to get enough business to support my wonderful daughter over here. Work the ball often. So, and some of my other clients are general contractors that do value engineering, and they'll like, hey, can we do this fiber-only thing? And it's really exciting. We'll do like tilt up, we'll do pavements or slabs. I have like clients that call me and ask me to do like these huge cold storage warehouse slabs, and there's these massive racks that have all this siding that go returning, and these huge gravity loads. And so we're using fiber structurally, we're using fiber just to help reduce cracking. So I kind of like get involved in all these different types of, I guess, industries, contracting. I work for precasters. So if you have any questions about any of those different industries, just fire away. But Patrick asked me to talk about Helix, and I've actually never had the pleasure of doing a design with Helix, and so they're not like one of my clients. But I'm under a non-disclosure agreement with them, so I've been able to see some of their test data and get to know their product well, and so I can speak to it, and I'm also going to describe some of the other fibers just so that people here know what's out there. But Helix is pretty unique, and so it's kind of taken me a while to figure out what's going on with Helix. And you'll see why. What else do I want to say? I think that's it. It's just kind of my background. So I just want to be clear, I'm not like a Helix rep. There's plenty of here that can help you with that. And they have samples that you can take back to your office and show your clients or show the city or whatever on what the micro reinforcement, micro rebar looks like. And so anyway, this says fire reinforced concrete. This clearly is an ICF job right here. Obviously not, but there is something missing, which is the rebar. So that is kind of one of the biggest deals in fiber is we can reduce some of the rebar by mixing reinforcement into the concrete at the batch plant. So the reinforcement shows up with the concrete instead of having a separate train. That's pretty cool. So one of the most popular fibers out there is Macrosynthetics. Probably because of just cost, and it's easier to like throw it in the mix. It's very light. So people like Macrosynthetics for those reasons. Historically they were more for your slab on ground, plastic throwing shrinkage, some of the lighter weight reinforcement needs. And you might even have very, very thin fibers that are very popular in residential flat work. These are like microsynthetic fibers, and they really help on those dry, windy days when you don't want to have the bleed water that can't keep up with the evaporation. You get this cracking at the surface because the concrete has no tensile strength yet. It's like an hour old, right, or a half hour old. So adding some really fine plastic fibers can help keep all those micro cracks from opening up and give you a little bit more, leeway when you're finishing in hot, dry conditions. But so up on the left, these are, I'm not really going to talk about microsynthetic fibers just because we're talking about replacing rebar, so we're going to go to something bigger, like a larger fiber, like an inch plus. So the ones on the top left, these are tape, they're called tape fibers. All of these are polypropylene and polyethylene, either blends or like single chemicals. The one in the middle is kind of a twisted tape. The one on the right is a crimped stick. It's got some like wavy crimps in it. The one on the bottom left is a tape, but it's like sliced. So when you open it up, it's like a net. So that helps with the, the grabbing onto the cement paste. And then the one in the middle is a twisted rope. And the one on the far right is what they call an embossed stick. So there's, you dream up all these different ways to like spit polypropylene out through a die, and you can come up with different shapes and anchorage and all these. So these different companies exist that have tried to solve the problem, like how do we get a kind of slippery plastic you grab onto concrete? And so you get these shapes, you got these twists, you got all kinds of stuff. You may notice like the one in the bottom middle is, that's called Fortifero. It's popular with finishers because as you can tell, it's kind of like bundled into a kind of a lump. And so it kind of gets into the concrete really easy, and then I think it tends to spread out. And then you have other fibers that are better, like bottom right. If you're in like kind of top middle, if you're trying to do like structures and precast, and you want a fiber that's really going to give you a lot of structural capacity. So every fiber has its, has its thing. So this is kind of a quick and dirty slide on macrosynthetics. They're about 1.5 inches to maybe 2¼ inches long. And then, so for steel fiber, you have your kind of traditional top left is a single hook at the end. Again, you're trying to figure out how do we anchor into concrete or get that bond, because the fiber has to be able to like bridge a crack as it's opening into the concrete. And so they're trying to get a way to anchor it, because the rebar, has the deformations. Well, this is fiber's way to try to get that development length. The top right is, I think that's a Beckert 4D. It's got two like anchors, so you get a little bit more anchorage, and then that enables them to increase the tensile strength of the steel. So now you get a little more capacity. And they also have a 5D that has, guess what? Another like kink, They only get a patent for like every time they twist it one more time. But so there's those kind of traditional steel fibers. There's some wavy crimped fibers that are better for maybe like composite metal decks where you don't need a lot of capacity. You just need some of that cracking and protection. And then bottom right is Helix, which is kind of the subject of today and the fiber that was used in the habitat projects to replace rebar. Helix is very unique. So I couldn't kind of picture where there was a ruler. a lot of these pictures came from a Minnesota Department of Transportation research project where they like tested all these fibers for overlays. And so they had like, rulers and everything. But for Helix, it's about it's an inch long, but it's very unique. And, Dennis has these available for everybody. They're really small, and this is another, like a competitor for Becker, Harris out of Germany. You can just kind of tell they're pretty different size. This is like 2¼ inch long, this is an inch. And then, so you're like, well, how are you going to get any bonding with such a small fiber? But the unique thing about Helix is they put a twist in it. That's kind of like a patent trigger right there. Oh, we're going to twist it. And then also the shape of, like, when they draw this wire out, it's not just like round. It looks like it's more like a triangle, but like the sides of the triangle are like bowed in. And so, like, how can we maximize the surface area of this fiber and minimize the volume so that we get the most bond in the concrete? So you just mathematically figure out all these different shapes, and they come up with like a triangle it's like a circle, but you rotate the circle at the points where the triangle hits the circle. You rotate those in. You get this like kind of weird, kind of like a skinny, sucked up triangle shape. And so there's a lot going on. You're like, oh, it's just a little stick. But it's like, no, this is like, I have a textbook. It's like literally this thick on how this fiber was developed, written by a professor at Northwestern University. And like I reference it all the time for all kinds of fiber design because he talks about like fiber orientation or bond strength or surface area. So all the parameters he used to like figure out the engineering properties of the fiber are in this textbook. And I don't know if he had the original patent or what, but Helix kind of came out of that whole innovation there. So it's not your typical fiber, but it does have some interesting things about it. I thought the best way to just go through this was to just run a count, because that's the thing that I see missing in most like fiber presentations is you get some overview of what you can do with fiber, but people are left like dazed. Like, oh, it's wonderful, but like I have no idea what I would do if I sat down in my office and tried to take number 4 rebar and get to pounds per cubic yard. So I just thought we'd just grab our 6 inch thick what the heck is it called? Insulated Concrete Form, ICF wall. And just run like our little rebar conversions. We're gonna go from rebar to fiber and just see how this math works. So hopefully I don't lose anybody, but I think it's gonna be most instructive. So I guess, right, thankfully on the 3,000 PSI, because I'm like residential, probably not 4,000. Number 4 is 18. That turns out, I guess, to be the longitudinal or verticals, and it's a little bit tighter for the horizontal. So when you do the math, you have you'll see, you have an area of steel. If I slice the rebar, just looked at it like this, 0.133 inches. And then you have a ratio reinforcement. If I like take that rebar and I say, how much is that compared to the like cross section of 0.00185? And so it's like 0.18%. That's a very typical number in the building code for just shrinking temperature steel. It shows up a lot of places, like also minimum flexural reinforcement. But if it's flexure, you like put it on one of the faces and not just like in the middle. So this is kind of, actually, I want to show that one first. So this is sort of what happens when you look at the wall in terms of a cross section. You got the rebars, and they have a certain amount of area, cross-section area, and then you have the whole piece of concrete that has a lot of area. And so you're like, how much rebar do I have to my concrete? What's the ratio? And that's called the reinforcement ratio. And so the calc is down kind of the bottom. That's that rho L. And so that becomes important because that's what the code talks about. And so with our number 4s at 18 in a 6-inch number, this is how we get the math that you saw on that first slide. We get an area of reinforcement that's not just, one number 4, because we don't have a number 4 every 12 inches. It's a little bit more. So it's kind of like we have less than number 4. And so that's how much area we have, and then we divide that by the concrete area. We have like voila, our 0.18% or 0.0018. This is the number the building code wants you to have in your wall. And this also, like, the code talks about this for lots of things, beams, two-way slabs are elevated, slabs underground, whatever. So reinforcement ratio is a very important concept. So for like what Jared had to do, and Kenny and his team, they had to like figure out all these different ways the walls getting pushed on or pulled and stuff. And so there's different like code, requirements depending on whether you're trying to bend the wall like out of plane like the wind would, or whether you're trying to resist a shearing force that's like in the plane of the wall, that we call a shear wall. And, or if you're pushing down on it, like holding up a roof truss or something. So I just grabbed a couple little screenshots from the code, and just for like the shear wall. So the one that says in plane shear, the arrow that's like going along the top of the wall. That's where they have, depending on I guess like how strong your rebar is and whether you're doing cast in place or precast. And they have the kind of 0.002 and the 0.001, and those are kind of in the same range as the 0.0018. So there's just different parts of the code that come into play, and you don't want me to sit here and like run you through which ones to use, but just to know that like if you have a certain amount of shear, it kicks you up to a higher, like down at the bottom, it kicks you up to a higher 0.0025. Like, oh, that's a lot of rebar. But if you don't have a whole lot of shear, like less than the concrete shear, you can do less rebar. So these are sort of what the designers are dealing with when they're trying to design a concrete wall to resist like earthquake or wind loads. And this is what we're trying to deal with when we're switching rebar fibers like these. How much rebar do we need? Like what does our fiber need to do? So we go and do all the calcs. And this is where usually people are like, I have no idea how these companies get their math. And so what's important to know about like these fibers and sort of the ones I showed you is they're typically tested with a beam, because testing concrete in tension is super hard to do. There's not a standardized procedure in America. It's all in the universities. And so it's just not practical for like a building material that gets used a lot. So beam testing is pretty typical. We use it in pavement a lot. We take a 6x6 by 20 inch long beam and break it in bending. And you figure out how good your pavement is. How thick do I need to make my highway pavement? Well, we can use a similar test to figure out how much, when I put in a certain amount of fiber and I bend it, like how tight does it hold my crack? How many like percent of the original concrete strength is it good for? So like a really high dosage would be 50%. Of the original concrete flexural strength, or 100% or something. And so that's kind of how we judge how good is a fiber, is we put a bunch of it in the beam, and we break it to bending, and we do a bunch of math. And so there's a difference between like every single fiber except for helix and how to do it, and then there's like a different procedure for helix. So for regular, kind of the longer, bigger fibers, you got so much rebar, and you pull on it, like, I gotta sit here and tell a code official, like, yeah, it's the same amount of tensile strength in my structure as regular rebar. So they're like, well, prove it. So I say, okay, I'm gonna pull on a rebar and see how many pounds I get. Say it's 10,000 pounds or something, and I'm gonna spread that over the amount of concrete that rebar is like in charge of, and I get a certain amount of PSI of tension. So for this project, for the Habitat home, we needed 111 pounds per square inch of tension out of this fiber, because that's kind of what the rebar was doing before we wanted to switch. And then we're like, oh, shucks, we can't test it in tension. Like, can't use it. So we have to use the bending test. But because flexure and tension are different by about a factor of 3, this is what really trips people out. You got to convert from pulling to bending. And so we're like, yeah, we need 111 PSI, but we're going to test it in a beam. So we need to increase that to 300, because that's the number we need to look for in the beam test, because testing like this is different than testing like this. And that's a whole other math, like proof that you don't need to go into. But these are like written down in some of the codes and ECI documents. So like, okay, we all agree it's 0.37, that's the conversion factor. So we need 300 PSI out of our beam test in the lab. And then we got like the rebar, we're using 60,000 PSI rebar. Yeah, but when you test it, it's like 66,000, right? There's like a higher value when you actually test it than what you count on in structural design. So you have to make sure it matches apples to apples. So we increase it by like, that feed factor of 90. So we need a little bit more to match that same type of strength we're talking about. It's called characteristic versus mean strength. Or in America, it's really called specified strength versus the like required average strength or whatever. And then so 330, let's say, the middle row is what we need in our bending beams. So we go to the lab, we put in a bunch of fiber, and we're like, boom, we need somewhere between 9 and 13 pounds per cubic yard of macrosynthetic fiber, the plastic fibers. Okay? And the 9 represents a really high-performing fiber, and 13 represents a lower-performing fiber, like maybe one of the tape fibers that doesn't have a lot of like embossments or anchorage or whatever. So that's, I don't know, just to me, that feels like that's a lot of fiber, right? You're like, it's $6, maybe a pound, you're like $56 a cubic yard extra, maybe $70 to $80 on the top end. So you're like, ooh, okay, that's a lot of cash. So for slabs on ground, we kind of take advantage of a reduction, and that's kind of why you see that top row. But I wanted to show you that just because like a lot of you have had experience with slabs, and you're like, no, we're using like 3 pounds or 4 pounds, like we're talking about 9 pounds of like macro fiber. Well, it's just because it's a slab on ground, it's non-structural, we're able to account for some early age properties of what fiber does to concrete, so we can reduce the needed tensile strength to like 55 instead of 100. So if this ICF wall was like laid down and it's a slab on ground for like the same project, we could reduce it and we need 4.5 to 5 pounds, something like that. If we were steel fiber, we need 17 to 30 pounds, but don't be tricked. That's like steel just weighs more, so that's actually not more fibers. So that's the thing with fibers, like you gotta talk about the lower number, the volume percent. It's like how much is the fiber in terms of like a volume. That's apples to apples. So I know it's a lot of information, but I'm trying to just convey that like if it's a non-structural element, we can get a much more efficient dosage because we're not actually needing a structural piece of rebar there. In the middle row is where we are in this project. We're like a structural member, but we're not like a beam over a kindergarten. We're like at a certain load level and a certain application where we don't need this like much higher feed factor because there's like a lot of volume and there's a lot less variability in the mixture. So for this habitat, we're right there in the middle. We need 9 to 13 pounds per cubic yard. Synthetic, we need maybe 45 to 50 pounds per cubic yard of steel fibers if we were to reach out to like, your more typical like hooked end steel fiber. So you might be wondering, okay, well, Helix, if this project was like 18 pounds, how'd you go from like 50 to 18? And that's always been my challenge with Helix. I'm like, how do you I figured this out. And so the problem with, because Helix is like trying to do something a little different, they're making their steel fibers so much smaller and thinner that there's so much more of them. And so they're trying to like almost move toward a microfiber and to change the way concrete responds at a kind of a different level. So you got the big long fibers that are supposed to handle like big wide cracks, but the Helix is much better at like smaller cracks and almost like increasing the flexural capacity of concrete. And so for Helix, and you'll see on the next slide how this works, it just seems to be like more efficient, but they can't test their fiber so much in that normal bending test because that bending test biases long fibers because in the bending test, the crack like opens up really wide, like 4 or 5 millimeters. It's crazy. Like who's designing a house? It's got like a 5 millimeter wide crack in it, right? Like yes, if I'm doing shotcrete and mine and I'm doing like rock protection, those do go through these massive like bending moments. And same if I'm doing cold storage structural design, the cracks on the bottom under like the 12 or 24 inch floor, yeah, they'll be like this, but the owner doesn't know or care. The fiber's holding them tight. But you never do that like in an ICF wall, having the wall like bending over like this much and opening, you know, it's like, that's not. So Helix makes sense in this situation, but you wouldn't say use Helix in like a 100-foot tall ASRS cold storage building where you need these huge cracks to be bridged. So like the right fiber makes a big difference for the right application. So we got 18 pounds per cubic yard, which is actually just 0.14% volume. You know, compare that to the, whatever, the 0.59, or if it were the other steel at 0.34. So is that like maybe half? We need basically half the amount of steel fiber that the other kind has. And so this is, for the people who are super nerdy in the room, this is, I think, why Helix is able to do what they do. Is because they got the twist, because they have that special shape, and because there's so many fibers per pound, they just have more like area to influence the concrete in a tension crack. And so this was like a huge learning curve for me. I'm just like, I can't understand, like, how am I supposed to do this with Helix? Because I can't use my beam test, which like, that's how I was raised, is all fiber gets tested in this special beam test. So, but Helix can't do that. It's too short, right? It's for a totally different type of application. So they worked with the university to come up with a direct tensile test that's like in a university environment, and they provided all those like test results to these building code approval agencies, IAPMO and ICCES, to provide sort of their design guidance for people like you and me who are designing with fiber. And so these are based on, like the one I think that was used by Helix engineers for this job was based on direct tensile testing. And so they're not going to do the beam. They're just jumping right to the, they're just like, no, we need 111 PSI. You know, we're just going to test straight out. And we're going to limit our strain, and we're going to like do some other things. And it's all outlined in this 30-page report we can read. But it provides a rational basis for the calculations. And it took me a while to get on board with that. So I understand there's some engineers in the house that are like, I don't know, they just sent me the number, I'm not sure. But I think if you dig in, you can satisfy yourself like, okay, it's based on some of the test data. And so like notice, the regular hole hooked end steel fiber has 3 square inches per cubic inch of specific surface. That's how much bond area it has for the dosage. But the Helix is like almost twice as much. If I like move the decimal one more, I think it's like 2.8 compared to 5.0. So I think that's how Helix is able to get lower dosages, because I know a lot of structural engineers are like, Helix, it's crazy because they're just half the dosage of everybody else. Like, how's that happening? But they haven't, I don't think, taken the time to like look at it and sort of understand what's happening with the number of fibers per pound, 11,000 versus 1,500. I think that's a big difference. So they're just different things. And so, so I wanted to equip you with some real math and some real engineering so that you can understand it's not just like made up. There's a rational basis behind this, and you can use whatever fiber you want. But the reason the Helix dosages are so much lower than the others is, I think, because of this unique size of fiber and all the like patented twisting and shape. It's my best guess. I need to like still work with them some more and understand it better. But this at least is like my first sort of shot of understanding. Like, wow, they're kind of in a really unique place in the fiber world. They're not a big fiber, they're not a microfiber, they're like somewhere in the middle. And so you use them for areas where you don't have large crack widths, like ICF. You don't use them in, like rockfall protection, where the like slab above the highway is going to like go through these major deformations. Well, that you would use a 2 1/4 inch steel fiber with like 16 hooks. You want to like get as much anchorage as possible. So it's just super important to use the right fiber for the right job. And you've got these code approvals from Helix that help sort of grease the wheels as you move through the design process. Becker, which is another fiber company, has their own version of like the design rules for people that need bigger crack widths, and I use that a lot in cold storage. So if this is all like too much to memorize, there's a lot of this information is just available on the ACI. And the biggest problem with fiber in general is that it's not in the building code specifically. You know, so like, hey, I want to use fiber. Like, I don't even know how to approve this. It's not even in the code. So that's why these things are important, because they bridge like new technology, like Simpson strong ties, or like, you know, adhesive anchors. They all have these because the code doesn't deal with Simpson. Like, it doesn't know what Simpson's doing. How are you supposed to write a building code around a product? So there has to be a way to like bridge between innovation and safety, and these agency approvals are kind of a clearinghouse for companies to like, here's all our data, we know it's safe, and then these companies are like, yeah, we went through all the, you know, it's good. It's different, but it's good. So in Europe, at least thankfully, like I designed with this a lot, it's a European kind of concrete code, and it actually has design rules for fiber. So like I don't need one of these if I'm designing like based on the European code. So I actually rely on this quite a bit when I'm doing like underground precast or something crazy that needs like really heavy duty structural design procedures and stuff like that. So I'm doing like finite element nonlinear analysis of like these burial vaults and stormwater vaults, cold storage, all that kind of stuff. So more than you ever wanted to know about how you go from rebar to fiber, but I just wanted to share that it's a rational engineering approach. There's different types of fibers. Helix has lower dosages because it's just in this very unique place in terms of size and volume. So I think that is all I had. But I have, let's see. So yes, you have, so Dennis has all the like samples for folks that want
on the back table.
And then, you know, there's some like, here's some ultra high performance concrete, super tiny steel fibers that are used in like, you know, bridges that have no rebar. But beware, these are like 2%. So you're adding like $200 a cubic yard for that. And then your normal steel fibers. So feel free to, you know, check out some of these. Here's some synthetic fibers, KPC polymers, metal employer, Fab-Pro. You know, there's some steel, some plastic. So there's kind of you know, options up here. And then I have a couple of these cool like plan waves for any like local contractors. Does anybody have like plans that get blown around in the wind? So these are any other local contractors that have to like roll out plans on their hood? These are super helpful. Got one here. Last. You guys have any specific questions about fiber?
I just have, in your work, how often do you say to the client, fibers, you know, this amount of fiber replacement is going to be too expensive relative to the rebar that you would have done within? What percentage of your work do you say that to a client?
I do say that maybe like half the time. Yeah, because like a lot of clients are like, hey, I want to do this super cool thing. I'm like, yeah, but you need a percent of this crazy like polyvinyl acetate fiber from Japan, and it's gonna be expensive. And they're like, ooh, I'll just use. You know, so there's this back and forth. So you can like you're using a like kind of concoction of these fibers in I think Canada to do seismic retrofitting on school buildings. They'll like spray like an inch layer thick engineered composite that's super high performance tensile strain hardening. So it acts like rebar when you pull it. It's crazy. But you know, it has a really high amount of fiber in it, so it's very expensive. But they're only spraying like an inch, and they're able to leave the existing walls in place. Imagine how easy that is. You go into the classrooms, strip off the drywall, the kids are gone for the weekend, they spray, low pressure spray stuff, finish it, and walk away, and they have like seismic ductility now, because they have like 2% volume of fiber, whereas you could see in our side of the ground, we have like 0.3% volume, right? So that's like 6 times more fiber in these highly engineered, super expensive thin. So I'm working with a contractor in Texas on doing like a pretty something like this, but for a very thin overlay for parking lots. You know, we have like all these crappy asphalt parking lots everywhere, and the owner's like, I just want something thin that'll last another 20 years. And so we're kind of coming up with the right balance and cost. And it comes down to a lot of like how we test it. If you just do your regular old testing, sometimes it doesn't really give the fiber its like true value. So it is often, it's just like, oh, that's too expensive because they want to try to do too much with the fiber. What I found is like hybrids are very nice. And one of the powerful things about my consultation services is that with finite element analysis, I can actually fuse rebar and fiber together because it's a very like nonlinear thing where the fiber gets a certain load based on how much the rebar is stretching. It's like very iterative, like how much is everything stretching?
So, you know, kind of like a conversation we're having with vaccines, do you mix fibers?
Oh, yes. Yeah, like you'll have a microfiber for plastic shrinkage cracking, and you'll have a macrofiber for like drying shrinkage cracking. So like they're handling different track sizes at different times of the concrete slab. And also there's research that shows when you have a smaller microfiber, it actually enhances the bond around the bigger macrofiber. So it's a symbiotic effect. And in that engineered concrete composite they were spraying on the school buildings in Canada, I think that's a mix of 3 different fibers. There's some like nanotube fibers, they have like some maybe these polyvinyl, and then maybe another. They're all quite small. They didn't show up with like these 2-inch fibers like trying to spray it. It really becomes a almost like a nanotechnology of these little teeny fibers that are helping the concrete to act like steel and be able to ductily chew up energy when those walls are trying to, you know, separate from whatever's holding them up top, I guess. I don't know if that's.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You talked about wind shear, seismic, and tensile strength. Could you talk a little bit about compression, especially in a multi-level wall?
Yeah. Compression isn't affected until you get up into those really high volume percentages of like 1% or more. So unless you're spending like $100 cubic yard on fiber, the concrete compression really isn't affected negatively or positively. What you will see is when you do break a cylinder, it'll fail in a more like ductile, sort of slower, no explosion manner. It's just like kind of gives up slowly. You won't have this boom where you need like that safety grade. Like I was at the USBR lab in Denver, Colorado, and they broke, you know, a cylinder this big. It's the heaviest testing machine in the country, and it literally sounded like a bomb went off. They had like plexiglass shields around the whole thing, and it was, I don't know, like 1 million pounds of force or some ridiculous number. And so if that had fiber, that would never sound like that. It would sound like something just giving up slowly. And so they use fiber in like, you know, those rock sheds and blast protection for security and things where you need a lot of calories chewed up as the concrete's like getting beat up.
Okay, actually, I have a couple more questions too. You talk about non-metallic fiber. If you have, there's such a difference in density between those light poly materials and a heavy slung concrete, how do you determine that you're going to get the mixture where you're going to get a proper mix and not have separation and be denser in one areas?
Yeah, well, mixing is always a challenge. Like if some people start with balls and they expect the concrete to unball it, and it's just never going to happen. We have to like introduce the fiber in a reasonable way. So yeah, like the plastic is 0.91 times the weight of water. So it's a little bit lighter than water, but not so much that it's like, you know, rushing to the top of the mixture. There's enough cohesion and like friction with the cement paste that it kind of stays where it wants to stay. But mixing needs, I mean, yeah, especially if like you have a self-consolidating concrete, you really have to make sure that your admixture company is tuning that properly. Especially if you have a high volume of fiber, it requires a lot of paste to coat all those fibers. Fibers basically act like coarse aggregate, just long and skinny. So you need a lot more paste to coat fibers at 10, 15, 20 pounds per cubic yard.
Thank you. I have one more quick question. You're building a concrete deck on the second floor and suspended. Would you use rebar? Would you use this helix fiber, or would you use both? What would be the proper?
I have a slide I can like unhide that shows that. Yeah. I'm gonna unhide that slide. Unhide this slide. Just 3 slides I'll show you. So it depends if it's composite or not. If the concrete deck is like grabbing onto the concrete and you're relying on the metal and the concrete to resist bending,
Right.
then you need, it's actually, this is like the few things that's in the building code, thankfully for fiber, because it references the Steel Deck Institute. You need like 4 pounds of the macro or 25 pounds of the steel. Those are just prescriptive, like, hey, somebody did a calc way back and that's about right. Some of these things can allow you to redesign that and go lower. Like Helix would never show up and be like, oh, we need 25 pounds. They would just say like, no, we're just gonna redesign that. Here's 10 or 15 or something. So that's for composite metal decks. So you kind of have these code-based prescriptions unless you want to redesign and do like a custom design with a fiber company or like an engineer like myself. If it's just a form deck where there's no like composite action between the metal and the concrete, then you're kind of back into the structural concrete world. And you have to be careful. Then you're kind of like, well, we need minimum reinforcement for flexure, and then we're going to add fiber for whatever's left over. So it's typically a hybrid.
So if you weren't relying on the fiber for structure, but you just wanted to lessen the chance of cracking, then it would probably be a good thing to use the Helix in conjunction.
Yes, you can always just add fiber because most companies have ICCS report that says the fiber won't ruin concrete.
Would you be better off using the Helix for a light fiber on a deck like that with the steel?
I don't know. I've actually never like compared the two in terms of like the exercise that I went through just then. I mean, they're probably going to be about the same. I don't know. You know, you have 4 pounds prescription-wise of, you know, like a tape fiber or whatever, and then, you know, you have whatever it could be like maybe, I don't know, 0.1% or something of the 2 legs. I guess I just have to go through that exercise and see which one's cost different. You know, how much are they each worth in terms of like replacing rebar? Because even though like if we're not replacing rebar, that's a lot of the way we think is like, let's pretend like we have rebar and then let's compare 2 fibers against each other as they're trying to match that same tensile strength. So I guess I'm not sure.
One of the services that Helix does provide, if you can get me an electronic version of any of your structural issues at no charge, Helix Engineering will provide an analysis showing how much replacement, how much poundage per yard you would need to replace any rebar or other reinforcing materials. So, I mean, I don't know how we do it, but no charge to you. We will give you an engineering analysis of how you can do replacement. And typically what we're finding is that we do get cracks down to micro cracks. Literally hairlines is what we find. And we'll also work with you with your plans so that if you have 6 different pours, you know, with 6 different dosages, we will, you know, work things out so that you can use one dosage throughout with some hybrid applications where you would have other types of rebar. What I'm seeing from the pricing of steel, it's not jumped up like lumber has, but it has increased phenomenally, and the actual poundage that you will use, the number of tons of steel you put into the building, will be reduced dramatically when you go to Helix. Anywhere from about literally half the volume of steel. If you're looking for lead points, that means that you're using less steel, which is a very high carbon footprint product. So you can drop your carbon footprint, drop the volume of steel. We also, if you're interested, will provide a review of your plans so that you can literally but you can literally decrease the volume of concrete that you would be using. We have replaced 16-inch slabs with 8-inch slabs in some applications.
Brandon, did you?
No, I had a separate topic per question, but actually kind of building off of the question about the compressive strength and just seeing like in the ICF projects using 3000 PSI for a residential slab, there's kind of a low paste content in those, and so when you're adding a fiber that does have, even though it's hydrophobic or whatnot, it does have a demand on that paste content. Are you seeing yourself bumping that up and ultimately having maybe a higher strength concrete mix that might yield a smaller structural member, something along those lines as well?
Yeah. 4 or 5 pounds is kind of like that level where you're like, whatever you're doing now is probably going to work if you like take care of the mixing of fiber. If you're going above like 5 pounds per cubic yard of synthetic fibers, then you want to start making sure there's more paste available because the fibers act like more coarse aggregate. They have demand. And so you can either move to a smaller coarse aggregate, you can spend some more money on admixtures to regain some of that workability, or you can just be very, very cautious in your mixing. And really that's the key, is like not just throwing bags of fiber in the back of the mixer truck, but like taking the time to open the bag and like put it in, wait for it to disappear, put it in the next one. I mean, you have to really pay attention. In a SCC mix, perhaps you can just like throw all the crap in. But in a normal mix for like a house, yeah, it's kind of bony. There's not much paste there. So, but often you're not in these super high dosages for these mixtures. But you can also add like supplementary cementitious. It doesn't have to be like expensive cement. You can do, the slag or fly ash if you get it, or some sort of like mineral filler. Just increase the amount of water that's available for the fibers. So I guess the answer is there's like a cut point where you have to like start changing your mixture because now you're adding fiber. Does that make So we have 5 pounds.
Robert, can you talk about labor cost savings? Compared to conventional?
No. I don't have any. The fiber companies have all that stuff like, tortured to death, and they can provide that to you. That's all they do is these economic cases for why you should use fiber around the yard. So it's typically cheaper, but like the fiber companies use the current material prices. They'll include shipping. They'll include that market's labor price. They'll include the impact on schedule. It's like this spreadsheet, and I'm like, I just want to stick to the material prices. So I don't know exactly like that break point or what markets it works or what markets it doesn't. The desk does.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay. I've done a lot of projects with Helix, and in fact, I'd say 100% of the projects we do now are done with Helix in some form. Some of them are hybrid, some of them are not. And Dennis and I have worked on projects where we've done no conventional steel whatsoever. So when you have no conventional steel, you have no labor, because this stuff gets installed either on site, which takes a few minutes. Robert's talking about the caution of making sure it's mixed up properly. It takes a little bit of time. But the main issue is if it gets mixed at the batch plant, which is where Helix recommends it gets done, you have no labor whatsoever for this material, because the fibers, we've tested it so much it'll go through the 2-inch hose at 30 pounds per yard of concrete, which is a lot of fibers. And so when you take the raw cost of the material of conventional steel plus the labor factor compared to Helix with no labor whatsoever, it really starts to make this thing very cost effective. And you ultimately end up with a stronger structure, and you get your project completed in a lot less time. And what I've done with some contractors is run through the entire process of them getting a set of drawings, going all the way through takeoffs, ordering steel lying on the ground, putting it in the forms, bending it, cutting it, tying it, and then it gets in the way of the concrete. You cut all that out, and it starts to make this material incredibly cost effective.
Yeah, congestion problems can really be lessened or eliminated by switching over. And if you're doing piers, you can avoid doing cages and just use straight rods with the proper dose of helix. One of the best examples is that rather large Ferris wheel in Seattle, 83 feet deep piers, and they were able to eliminate the cages except for the last 8 feet to tie into the bond beam to hold that. And those, I believe it was 24 piers at 83 feet deep. Having been a rod buster, tying up those kind of cages is not something you want to pay for. I can assure you.
Yeah. The headaches you have on a residential ICF are like multiplied. Drill, a hole that's 100 feet or something crazy. And like on this situation, there's no crane time. You're not like waiting for the weld wire fabric to come all the way down and stuff. So like the fiber companies are very trained at looking at all the ways that you can make an argument financially for it. So they're your best resource.
I know that you engineers always go to the more conservative, but what's the trust factor, would you say, of having it mixed in at when it's being patched? Would you want to be there to watch how they're mixing it, or do you think that is going to be done?
I think at the beginning, like you're working with, let's say Matthew's Ready Mix supplies your job, and like, oh, we've never mixed fiber before. So you're like, okay, we're gonna have like full-time special inspection at the plant. So you're just gonna hire an inspector to sit there and just be on the slump rack or wherever and just kind of work with or watch the people adding fiber to the ready mix truck. Some companies have special distributors that like blow the fiber in, they'll add it to the aggregate belt, they'll put it in the way hopper, they'll like all these different things. And it can be controlled from the batch plant, like whatever. So it really varies. But with a new situation, I always do like full-time special inspection, and then you can go to like periodic and just show up once in a while, make sure, it's like a new guy isn't just like throwing guys in the back of the truck, like, oh, man. But I mean, the fiber companies are marketing like these bags are dissolvable, but I'm just saying, like there's marketing and then there's David's experience. Like open the bag and like just take the extra like 30 seconds to sprinkle it in.
What about when you're pouring it? So we've done, I think the tallest ICF wall we've done is 16 feet tall in one pour, which probably took 5 lifts. And it was pretty heavily vibrated as we were doing it.
Yeah.
The first 10 feet of that was an exposed space on one side. Do you see any issues where you could overwork the concrete that would cause some settling of the fiber? Or would that fiber still stay fairly well mixed in, like you were saying, with that, as long as you had the cement ratio right to where you had that mortar to kind of bond onto?
I mean, it's possible if you had a enough mix and you had like a steel fiber, more like the big steel fibers, it's possible they could start falling.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think you'd really have to sit there. I mean, you just kind of need enough vibration to get the air out into like, when you have that sort of not full joint, but there's like 2 layers, you need to like poke through those so the fibers can like get through that joint. Because you don't really want, just a plain old full joint. Even though like in a lot of the residential thing, it's more about the horizontal capacity, so you're like, but in some shear wall situations, you need like the vertical steel is important too. And so if you're like missing a whole plane of fiber, it's like, oh, we poured this 4 hours ago, and now we came in and like the fibers can't break into a new plane.
Yep.
Like if something happened and you like couldn't do the rest, you'd have to just do like epoxy out and just connect the 2 lifts, which is kind of a pain, but you have to do that with any kind of concrete.
You guys working pretty hard to get the fiber connections.
I think you would really have to mess things up. Yeah. The messing can, like there wasn't enough like viscosity modifying mixture in your like precast SCC or something, but you can see it on the when you do the like spread test, you can see it.
Yeah.
Like the water's like, shoo, and the fiber's like in a ball in the middle. You're like, this isn't gonna work. or like it won't even pump. You know, like all the water will like pump up the line and all the rock and fibers like stuck in. So, you know, you kind of know, like, oh, we're not gonna have fun vibrating this, but it doesn't matter, you can't even get it to your job. It's that screwed up from the beginning. So I think if the mix is done right, then, you know, just general good vibration practices will.
Helix has included what methods of dosing in their UES, so it covers that. They actually have included some basic engineering for standard concrete dosings, so that it's already all written up for you for some standard concrete applications. So it's pre-engineered essentially in the UES for you.
Does anybody here that deals with these local concrete companies know whether or not they have, that they're set up right to add this?
As a member of the National Ready Mix Concrete those that are not, you can't speak for them, but those members of our association, yes.
Who do we have coming up here in the campfire area for concrete? And do you personally know whether they're capable of adding this?
Yes, that is Ready Mix.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
They know how to do it.
And A&A, who's not a member yet, yes.
Okay.
A couple local. One quick question, then we need to move on. Did you have?
Just a real quick one, with plasticizers, mixing with it, you want to juice it up with it, with the fiber, does that cause a problem, or is that?
No, you actually need it if you're going to do like more than 5 pounds.
Okay.
You need to like include that cost in your mixture. You're like, oh, we need a little more cement, we need a little more admixture, add that into the cost. And usually the fiber companies will do that. They're like, yeah, we're saving all this labor, you need a little bit more cement, a little bit more admixture. Yeah.
I have a quick comment, just real quick.
Yeah.
The thing about rebar is, you know, just before the pour, right? You find something's missing, something's too long, something's too short. And then you got guys with the grinder out there, rebar falling all over the place, and you have liability. So with this, it's like so easy because you got none of that. You got no guys grabbing things the last second, prodding up against things falling over, tools flying out of their hands, none of that going on.
It's so easy if you can pump it, fix it, and finish it.
And just in closing from the ready mix side, we all kind of laugh, ha ha ha, we'll use less ready mix. Our goal as an association is to optimize mix design. And optimizing your mix design oftentimes leads to less ready mix use. So there's many ways to skin that cat. Some of it is changing out your bars and your helixes, and you know everything that goes into a mix design creates that product that we're going to use as the end product. So don't limit yourself. Get in early. Work with your local producers. They can help you create those mix designs and optimize the amount of concrete that you're going to use, which therefore optimizes your cost. And then from a global warming potential, you're going to reduce your overall carbon footprint, which then helps save the planet. So anyway, Rob, that was awesome. Thank you very much. Now we're going to turn it over to a man that at this point probably needs no introduction. And that's Mike Dalzell with Fox.
Real quick, kudos to NRMCA, Patrick Matsche, Monica, Chelsea, Habitat. You know, Patrick was right when he said earlier, we've all heard about Habitat, but I gotta tell you, when you're at a job site and somebody you've never met who's walking up to you, looks you square in the face and says, you know, what you're doing is changing their life. Can't top that. I'm taking that one with my grade. Okay, Jared, Rob, you guys are engineering folk. So really, what is an ICF? What's an ICF? In its most simplest explanation, what's an ICF? It's a form. That's all we're dealing with. There's a form for concrete. Boy, that really got nervous there. No. Holy crap, I didn't know it was going to be questioned today. So, you know, wood is a form for concrete. Okay, wood and ICF have something in common. Neither one of them add any structural elements to the wall. It's up to the guys with the shingles and the pencils to make the rebar schedule work for whatever that appropriate design is. The beauty of ICF is it gives you basically 6 steps in one instance. You put it up, rebar goes in, you fill it, you're now ready for interior finishes and exterior finishes. You don't have to wrap them with Tyvek, you don't have to do anything else. The low grade, you would still waterproof, obviously. No hot tar, please. I could have some worries. That guy's still in first place, by the way. Yeah, anyway, it's a long day. So the beauty of that, it's listed in Vision 3 of concrete, CSI specifications. So it's not something new. All you have to do is talk to an engineer. He's going to evaluate what the project is. He'll run the math, he'll make the rebar schedule work, and away you go. Okay, most of the ICF manufacturers are all going to have some kind of a standard core thickness. 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 is very common. A lot of them now too have the ability to use a knockdown system or expand the wall thickness as much as to 24 inches thick. So when you get into doing some high walls, and you talk about the taller the wall, the more shear, we have the ability to be able to provide that to you. You know, they're all going to have a variety of different shapes and sizes. Corner blocks pre-made. Some manufacturers don't have corner blocks, but they have a way to be able to fabricate a corner in the field using straight blocks. T-blocks, 45s, brick ledge forms. You got a whole variety of different things that you can do. Okay, different markets that we've gotten into with this. Houses of worship or churches, which the 2 most feared words in America show up. Volunteer help. At least at the Habitat job we had, you know, organized chaos and we were herding cats, but it was under control. Churches are a little different thing. Interesting thing about this market, the Phoenix Catholic Diocese is the 2nd largest Catholic diocese in the United States. And I know you all knew that already.
Oh, yeah.
The largest is Boston. Interesting thing, Phoenix was committed to building out of ICF for years. Schools, outbuildings, gymnasiums, okay? It's a Mason's town. It's all union masonry down there. Masons wanted nothing to do with this. They hated it. Well, that stuff's going to put us out of work. Okay? So they started losing projects to ICF installers. And then one day they had a meeting. And they said, hey guys, boat's leaving the dock. We're going to jump on, we're going to wait from the dock. We're jumping in. They went down to the diocese shortly thereafter, said, we're going to start bidding ICF. They haven't lost a job since. Okay? And that kind of transpired out of a couple things. The industry is suffering from a tremendous labor shortage. Before that, okay, the industry was getting older. Masons are having a terrible time recruiting young people into that industry. Who wants to lift an 8816, which weighs about 24 pounds, several dozen times a day? Nobody. So they started hurting to the point where, as a trade, they started going after commercial projects for ICF. They were trained, they were supervised, they started putting these things up. And there's a ton of companies, pretty much nationwide now, that are masonry based. I mean, IMS Masonry is one of them out of Utah. Their trade is in their name. And right now, they're probably doing, on a scale of projects, 60-40 ICF to masonry. They found out they can crew down. Instead of putting 40 guys on a job, they can go down to 10. They can get more production. So what that does now, it frees them up to release those other 30 guys to go find another project and work on it. So they realize in the same amount of time, they're generating revenue for their company, more than they would. So interesting little transformation there. Okay, these are just some things. We're doing a lot of mixed use buildings, okay? Retail, residential, hospitality market, hotels. I mean, where do they build hotels? Out on Walden Pond on 40 acres somewhere?
Yeah.
No, National Highway. Yeah, highway, airports, everything. Noise, okay? Back in 2019, I was on 121 flights with Alaska Airlines. I handled 7 states. And, I lived in an ICF home. And when I go to a hotel, I have the second day, it wasn't the first day, the second day, about 2 o'clock, I had a massive mood swing because of sleep deprivation. I go from an environment where I don't hear a thing to an environment where I hear everything. So hotels started realizing that, look where this place is, right on two busy intersections on the corner. Same thing. The quality of the environment for their guests was having those guests come back to those hotels, and they were able to compete more efficiently against other hotels that might have been built out of a different medium. More mixed use, all covered with brick. Theaters. Anybody ever been in a movie theater where you're watching your movie and you hear the other two on either side? Yeah. That's why they got into this. The hospitality industry, speed of construction was a huge thing. The next, where's Patrick? The next one they're going to have of these round tables down in Escondido, Carlsbad. Anybody going to go down to that one from here? Good, I can let the cat out of the bag. They're going to hold that at a project called a Synopolis, which is an entirely different kind of a marketing approach to movie theaters. None of the visitors are ever going to know it. But that was done, I think it was 31,000 square feet of wall, a crew of 9 masons, 16 days. Okay, they just put this stuff up and it went crazy. Put the developer 3.5 weeks ahead of schedule. He was really upset. He got over it quick though. But again, sound dampening, speed of construction, all kinds of different factors. Wineries. Wineries still have the best open houses. I'm sorry. What you guys did was great, but let's face it. Which one of these buildings is not ICF? The garage. The little ones. Yeah, basically these two. Okay. That's downtown Toronto, 16 to 26 stories. People go, man, you're going 26 stories? It's a reinforced concrete wall. I used to do the home show in Seattle before it lit the air out of the kingdom. And people would go, man, you're building the whole thing out of concrete? I go, hey folks, we're standing in one. Oh yeah, okay. Guess it works. So, speed of construction. Those guys are putting up about a floor a week on that thing. Residential, obviously. Military. Cool thing about the military, first branch of the government to basically adopt ICF from the standpoint of building resiliently. If you think about it, the military deals with stuff every day that we can't even fathom. Bad guys lobbing mortar rounds at them, gunfire, everything else. In fact, a lot of police stations now are using the same specification that the military has passed in what they call a force protection design collapse criteria. And what that basically means is if a bad guy lobs a mortar round into the corner of a building, the building is not going to collapse on itself because it has a redundancy factor that's designed into it. So the whole building basically supports itself. So any military project, barracks, maintenance facilities, anything like that, ICF is listed on the specification and we can bid those jobs. So it's kind of cool if you think about it. The same product that was blast tested by the military can be used on your home. Kind of a cool thing. Of course, the rebar is a little bit different on a blast resistant design. We do a lot of schools, a lot of dormitories. Texas Tech, that's where they have that famous video where they're firing a stud into a wall, a 2x4 framed wall, goes through like an arrow. Okay, ICF basically got a pile of toothpicks. And this is one of the reasons. Speed of construction has always been a driver on this stuff. Energy efficiency has been a driver. But when you get into doing dormitories and things like that, we were all 18 at one time, and we probably weren't completely respectful of other people's properties when we were that age. So the beauty of having an ICF for the exterior walls and also the demising walls of the dorms is, let's say the Red Raiders at Texas Tech go out and they just stink up the barn on Saturday afternoon. Somebody punches the wall, only thing they're fixing is their hand. Okay, so you got a lot of basic things, but here's the other thing. I don't know if you can read that. Beaver Creek Schools, they were able to get $500,000 on energy efficient rebates in the form of a tax credit. So if you're faster and you're stronger, and now if you look at the price you're paying for something, which includes the rebates, we're less expensive, conversation's not real long. Okay, so they're understanding we can build something that's going to be more durable. The life cycle costs will be reduced because the durability of the building is going to extend. And here's the other thing, net zero. Okay, governor in this state's been making a lot of noise about switching everything over to net zero, and then they were going to do that, and they found out, well, we just can't flip a light switch and make 30-something million people comply overnight. It's coming. Okay, City of Berkeley has already adopted it for new commercial construction. You have to achieve net zero energy, and what that basically means, layman's terms, you're consuming as much as you're saving. So it balances out to about a zero. When you do a net zero, there's several components that make up a net zero envelope. Wall systems are one. You also have to do better lighting. You can't do any gas. It has to be electric. Photovoltaic or solar are going to be involved, or geothermal possibly. So, but the interesting thing is the shell is a big part of the compliancy. Wood framing cannot be done with batt insulation and qualify for net zero. It has to be spray foam insulation. So if you use spray foam insulation, make that junk, you're now dealing with a licensed technician. So if anybody want to guess where that bill is going to go? It's going to be more expensive to do that. And you still don't have a resilient structure. So the beauty of ICFs in general, they're net zero ready wall systems. So if you're going to go ahead and use ICF on the exterior shell of a building, you're not going to have to do anything else to get that building shell to compliancy. Now you just got to deal with the other stuff, better windows, better doors, things like that. It was the largest net zero school, 100,000 plus square feet. At the time, there might be some that are actually larger now. That was back, I think about 4 years ago. I had a schedule under budget, and they got tax rebates. Boy, are they mad at us. That's the kind of thing that it makes sense, and then when it starts making dollars and cents, that's why people line up for this stuff. We were talking last night, a couple of ladies, about affordable housing, okay? How about affordable housing for seniors? All right, fixed incomes, they can't be spending a lot of money on additional energy bills and maintenance issues. I don't know if you could read that. This was in Oregon, town of Prineville. 82% less energy per square foot than a typical multifamily building. 77% less energy than the Oregon code. And 40% less energy than net zero threshold. Okay, so you've got seniors living in a building that is quieter, it's stronger, it's energy efficient, and it's resilient. You can't really see it, but they had receptacles for gray water coming off the roof, solar and photovoltaic. Really, really cool project. Okay, the energy efficiency, that's always been kind of a given with this stuff. You look at areas like California, here, Sacramento, Phoenix, where you're going to be more dependent, for the most part, on air conditioning than you would heat. Air conditioning is more expensive to cool a building than it is to heat it. So if you're able to impact that, and the national average is about 55% reduction on your energy bill, that's the national average. You get into those areas where the climates are more extreme, where it's hotter. Phoenix, we're seeing savings in upwards of 70% off the energy bill. So, that's money staying in your pocket versus going to the power company. Because last time anybody checked, did they legislated for the rates of the power bills to go down at all? Okay, good. Same in my state. Okay, so R value. It's kind of a dying term. The building industry is actually trying to get people to understand that when you talk about an R value of a wall, it's the most ineffective way to measure the performance of the wall system. All it's doing is taking the components that make up that wall and coming up with an R value. So if you look at that, average ICF is going to be about an R24, somewhere around there. Okay, so what's a 2x6 wall rated at? Anyway.
R21.
Well, yeah, typically R19 to R21. Okay, so you've got continuous insulation around both sides of the wall, top to bottom, end to end. You've got a solid thermal mass in the middle of that wall, which is going to mitigate BTUs from just walking through it. No deformity in framing. Tremendous amount of air reduction, air infiltration reduction. And you're telling me that we're only an R3 higher than a 2x6 wall? That makes no sense whatsoever. So what they're trying to do now is go to the U value, which is a little better measurement of the performance of the wall system versus the components that make it up. And this is also going to lead to some things as far as reduction of the tonnage of the HVAC systems. You still want to keep it high performance. Okay, was the glitter too much? Is that what the lights do? That happens a lot. I have to wear a hat outside. It's an FAA regulation. So, but you're able to reduce the tonnage. So if you can take a unit from 7 tons down to 5 tons, that's a few $100. I love this picture. Okay, this ICF house on the right is right in front of that on the other picture on the left. Now that's a framed wall that's insulated with an R19 back. Now if that were your x-ray coming out of the doctor's office, he'd say, get your affairs in order. Not looking good. So that gives you an idea of how heat loss in stud walls literally goes through in a matter of minutes. ICF walls, the only place you're really going to lose any energy at all is going to be around window door openings. Seal those properly, flash them. You're not going to have any issues. And this is the thing, continuous insulation, or what they call CI. ASHRAE 90 is basically part of the code requirement. State of California, I think it was 4 years ago, maybe longer, they adopted that as a commercial specification for buildings. Continuous insulation required. And when I was leaving the airport coming up here the other day, I was just getting on 70, and there was developments on both sides of the road. Wood frame houses being wrapped with foam. And I'm thinking, you know guys, you're headed in the right direction, but you're still building on a fuel, okay? That's what wood is. It's a fuel. Okay. We don't get a lot of tornadoes here, okay? But who's to say we're not going to? Has anybody noticed the last few years, things get a little wacky, okay? They had a tornado in Spokane 2 years ago, Spokane, Washington. Nobody ever saw one of those before, you know? People went out and took pictures of it and go, ooh, we had a tree here, you know, go to cover. This next one, hopefully, if it works. Okay, here we go. That was just an F4, 166, 180 mile an hour. Anybody know how long that ran? 42 seconds. Gone. So resiliency, you know, if you look at what's going on, we're having more natural disasters. They're at a greater frequency. They're at a higher rating from the standpoint of everything that's going on, be it tornadoes, be it hurricanes, storm surges, fires. which we're all too familiar with in this area. You know, this is what it's being forced to do. If you look at replacement costs, you know, when something happens in Joplin, Missouri, we're all paying for that out here. Okay, that's where the insurance rates go. If you're gonna build something that's temporary housing, which I call wood, and a wind blows through, okay, you're gonna be dealing with, you know, possibly loss of life. You're gonna be dealing with property loss. You know, the beauty of an ICF is when you build those and the wind blows, that house is not gonna change addresses. It's staying where you put it. Easy to find your way home. Okay, so here's how you get started. Basically, Raul, you want to take over from here?
Go ahead, Mike, you're doing a good job.
Man, I can see the size of his eyes back there. So, you know, it doesn't matter which system it is. You're going to have your slab or your footing pour. Your rebar nails are going to be stepping up. Then you're going to start from a corner, and you're going to put rebar in there as required by the engineer. Or if you're using Helix, then the horizontal rebar is not necessarily going to be in a wall. Which, if you think about it, you're stacking a wall 8, 10, 12 feet tall, and you don't have to stop and drop bar in it. Is that a faster day? Sure it is. And then as you go up, pretty much after the second course, some guys will use metal channels to secure the foam on the thing. I'm one of those guys that I kind of trust the technology. I mean, if you think about having to use a Tapcon or Hilti gun to screw or impact hammer a metal channel in the footing, that's going to be longer to do than it is to go ahead and, you know, take a can of spray foam, shake it up, and squirt it. When I handle Alaska, and a lot of guys up there, you talk about the last frontier. These guys call me up, well, I don't trust that spray foam. Why? Well, it's spray foam. I said, look, you're not trying to hold the form together. You're simply trying to hold it on the building line. And they go, well, is the spray foam tough? Yeah, that guy was pretty obnoxious over there. So we glued him in his hotel room. It took 3 guys 45 minutes to bust him out. Yeah, he was massively hungover. He was late for the meeting. It was awesome. I matured a little bit since then. Yeah, we never even got a bill for that. That was kind of cool. Okay, so once you get going, now you're going to make the decision about what kind of window and door books you're going to do. You can use, you know, pressure treated lumber. You use LSL. A lot of people are going to a steel frame, vinyl bucking systems, foam bucking systems. You know, this is where you get into designing something that's resilient. A lot of people are trying to get more wood out of the building. All right. The only place that you would have maintenance on an ICF structure after it's poured is going to be around window and door openings that contain a lumber component. Why? Lumber shrinks, cracks, expands, you know, so you're going to have some issues. A lot of the vinyl bucks do it on some of the commercial projects on the left. You're going to have to use a steel one just because they're doing like storefront windows or something like that. But that's the point where you're going to make those decisions and put these in. And then after you're going up, how are you going to get the wall straight? The forms are going to hold the concrete. Okay. Now what we're trying to do is get it to the point where the roof fits the first try. All right. So the alignment is a key component of that. Pretty much there are several 12-foot and less alignment systems that are available for rent or purchase. What's happened with the masons now, they've kind of taken their crank-up scaffolding and adapted it to be used with ICF. So they're not having to invest heavily in additional materials to do this. That was another thing about them kind of sliding in and starting to do projects. You know, they had to go ahead and make a massive investment, several $100,000 to buy more alignment. That probably would have killed the dog right there. And then before you pour, you want to go ahead, get the plumber out there, get the electrician. Okay, we need some hose bibs here, need some light fixtures up here, and you're going to put service penetrations through the wall prior to the placement of concrete. If you don't do that, okay, there's plenty of companies out there that are willing to come out and drill a hole and charge you for it. What's a 1-inch hole cost to core out in like a 6-inch concrete wall? Anybody? No, not 500. That's what you would charge because you're an engineer. Probably about $130. Okay. What's a foot-long piece of PVC, Russ? Maybe a buck? Okay, see, $150, $1. Okay, think about it. Yeah, so pre-plan that as much as you can. Get those things in the wall before you pour it. You're going to have less stuff to deal with later on. And then we actually do place concrete in these things. Okay, we also recommend internal vibration. All right, so you're having concrete placed. You're going to have a slump we like to keep up a little high. 6 to 7 inch. It's flowable, smaller aggregate. If you get somebody out there that says we're pouring an 8-inch wall and use 3/4 rock, you can go ahead and probably get that changed to a 3/8 inch mixture and not sacrifice any strength. The reason is you're not exposing the wall design to ambient temperature. It's not like you're stripping the form and all of a sudden all the moisture's going out. So old school engineers, no, I want a big rock. Well, big rock, if you're dealing with rebar, we kind of talked about that earlier, if you're dealing with congestion issues as far as placement of concrete, running a vibrator in and out, consolidating the wall properly. If you don't do that, you're going to have some issues. And then embedments. The cool thing, embeds for red steel, weld plates. A small company you probably heard of called Simpson. Okay, makes an actual ledger connector hanger they developed for the industry. So when you got companies like that are going ahead and designing products to work with our industry, that lends a lot of credibility to what we're trying to do here. But you're not limited to that. Floor systems and roofs, pretty much anything you want. TJI's, BCI's wood floor diaphragm. Again, you can do that. If you're pouring on slab, no issue. The one on the upper right is basically a foam decking system. There's light deck, there's insul deck, there's a bunch of different systems. You can go ahead and put those up, you shore them, put rebar in it, pour it like it's a regular slab, and now you have an insulated deck that's structural. And then you can do hollow core, and you can also do hambro, which is like a open metal stand truss with a concrete lid on it. So if you're getting to the point where you're building resiliently and you want to do more than less, then you're going to start thinking of ways to eliminate wood bucking, wood flooring, wood trusses, things along that nature. Okay, electricians, somebody mentioned earlier, it's all about education, and that is critical. You get somebody who's a client who wants to do this, and the thing that can kill this thing faster than a hammer on an ant is the subtrades. If the subtrades have never been involved with this stuff, the siding guy's never done it, the electrician's never done it. The thing that I used to do back in the days when I worked for a living, I'd have pre-con meetings. And I told guys, look, bring everybody out there, electrician, plumber, I'll buy the pizza. And they'd show up and they're having a little lunch fest, they're chewing. So anybody have any questions? Still chewing. One guy would raise his hand. So when you're putting wiring in this, how do you do it? And I'd say, well, we use an electric chainsaw. Huh? That's not in his tool bag. So you answer that question, everybody hears the answer, and then 15 more hands go up. Siding, sheetrock, all the questions are there. And then once you answer the question in a way that they're used to doing it in the way they've been doing things for years, they kind of relax and take a deep breath, and what's next after that, you're not going to see their bid jack through the roof because this is nothing different than what they're used to doing. They're just doing something different with it. So the electric chainsaw, you notice I put in there, or a hot knife to install chases after the walls have been poured. Very important timing thing. I have stories. That guy's in third place. I've done two things, third place. So you can do conduit, rigid or flexible. Vent stacks will fit into the forms. The foam is thick enough to allow that to happen. The only thing you have to deal with as far as putting Romex into a foam wall is to make sure that you have a separation from the nailing surface, which is the face of sheetrock, that's going to allow you to comply with the code. And that's based on the National Electrical Code. and that's typically 2 inches. They frown on people nailing into their 110 for some reason, go figure. Okay, then sheetrock is sheetrock. Most of the systems, their reports are gonna say it can be hung either vertically or horizontally. It doesn't matter. Most tradespeople are gonna come in and lay the sheetrock out horizontally, and that works fine too. So when you're putting the forms together, they're pretty much all gonna have a stud that's pre-molded into the wall, and it'll be visible on the exterior, the exterior of the foam. Could be on a 6 or an 8 inch center. That's the stud. And most of that stuff is in raised lettering, so I mean, Helen Keller's brother could find this thing. Not a big deal. Okay, then what do you want it to look like? You know, people, if they're not really familiar with this stuff, well, I don't want a foam house. Okay? No, really. So, I gotta take you on the road with me. This guy's a hoot. Yeah. So, you know, you can put brick veneer, 3-coat stucco, eaves. The exterior is going to look like anything you want it to look like. Okay, the only thing you got to deal with there is making sure that the fasteners that are going to be used are going to be compliant. If it's 3-coat stucco, you're fastening the metal lath mechanically to the studs. If it's an eave system, this is the same basic material that they're putting sheet stock on the exterior of the houses with. It's just a higher density. So the stucco applicators come out there, they'll rasp the foam down, they'll prep the surface, and they'll go ahead and do their base coat, fiberglass mesh color coat, good and gone. Cement siding, stone veneer, real stone, full brick, river rock. I mean, again, aesthetically, it's going to look like anything you want it to. People always ask me too, gee, I said, well, look, you live in a wood house now, right? And they go, yeah. Do you see what the walls are made of? No? Okay, we do the same thing. We just give you a lot tougher wall. And then design flexibility. Radius walls, if you can do that out of masonry or framing, very, very labor intensive, very expensive. You look at that one on the upper left, that first time home buyer, very simple floor plan. If that would have been done out of masonry, which was specified to be done with, and then converted over, you've seen masons work at job sites and have to cut radiuses. Extremely labor intensive, very slow. The beauty of this stuff, you folding pruning saw, fits in your back pocket. You make some scores, you bend it like an accordion and keep going. So you're not limited to building something that's a rectangle or a box. If you do, that's fine. Those are going to be less expensive because those are very simple. But it doesn't limit you to not getting into some pretty cool stuff. Okay, little trip down memory lane here as far as definitions. I've been doing ICF for 42 years. Okay, but yes, I started when I was 9. And a few things have changed. There was maybe 3 manufacturers when I started, and I had a full head of hair. So, twin daughters, that went away real quick. So, it was the green building thing. Earth Day back in the 70s, for those of you that were with us then, they started this movement about building green. And then it kind of got into some issues because if you had something in a green box, people were calling it green, so it was called greenwashing. So then the United States Green Building Council came up with some parameters that kind of controlled what people could do to call themselves green. And that kind of streamlined the funnel down a little bit, so we got less rubbish in the hamper. And if you look at that, green building is generally accepted as the planning, design, construction, operations of buildings with several central foremost considerations. Energy use, water use, indoor environmental quality, okay, which is a huge issue. Material section of the building's effect on the site. Okay, so that was kind of the green start to things. Then it rolled into sustainable. Okay, so what's sustainable? Practice of creating a healthy environment that's based on ecological principles, reduce the industry's impact on the environment by utilizing sustainable development practices, employing energy efficiency, again, and taking advantage of green technology. So there's some overlap between those two things. What they don't address is what resiliency does. Resiliency, in layman's terms, is basically our answer to Mother Nature when she gets pissed off. Okay, you got tornadoes, you got fires, and you've got 1,500 houses that are made out of fuel. You stand no chance. Those fires are going to consume that first row of houses. And as far as their building and density, not so much in this area, but you look at Sacramento where those houses are going up, you can borrow sugar from your neighbor reaching out your window. That's going to create a preheating condition. One house is going to burn, it's going to preheat the next one, that's going to go, it's just going to keep going. So if you can eliminate the fuel from those situations, it may not save the house, but it's going to get to the point where you might be talking about repair versus replace. And I got to tell you, that's a smaller bill, and not to mention life saving. So there you got a couple of circles: sustainability, resilience. There's some overlapping characteristics in the middle there. And then in recent decades, this is kind of the harsh thing. They've actually been rating disasters as billion-dollar events. They've actually started charting those, okay? Since 1980 to 2020, billion-dollar events were 7.1. $7.1 billion events in 40 years, okay? Most recent 5 years, $16.2 billion events. 2020 set a new record of 20 events in excess of $1 billion. 2021, we're at 18 right now. Year's not over. You know, things you got to understand. You know, they used to talk about fire season. There's no such, I mean, that's an obsolete term. Fire season's every day, okay? I live in Oregon. You know, I think our two states have been having a race. Who's going to burn up first? We've had some tremendously damaging fires up there, loss of life, everything else. Okay, here's the 20 top largest California wildfires. You can't read them all. 8 of the top 10 are in the last 4 years in California. 8 of the top 10. Camp Fire didn't even make the list. Okay, even though it was the most expensive natural disaster in the world, and it had the largest loss of life. Okay, according to the statistics they do, which is basically just total acres burned, it didn't make the list. I can tell you right now, that doesn't make anybody in this room feel better. Okay, so that's why we're trying to get away from this stuff. Kind of the nice thing about it with the NRMCA, kind of, you know, swinging their muscle a little bit. There's been legislation that's been enacted in Washington, in Georgia, and also in California, where they're going to be limiting the heights of multi-use buildings built out of lumber to 3 stories or less. Why? When you get up in the air higher like that, and that fuel is there, you know, you're talking about a window of escapability that's not existent anymore. Sprinklers do not put out fires. Does everybody understand that? They're called fire suppression systems. All that's doing, your building starts to ignite, it's supposed to give people a window of opportunity to get out of the building and get away without being killed. It's not going to put out the fire. It's hopefully going to delay things up till the guys in the white hats show up. Okay, this was a study that was done, Los Angeles County. State of California has what is the 8th or the 10th largest economy in the world. Okay, so, you know, maybe you're not big fans of LA, but you know, they have some issues going on down there that really affect everybody, not just in the state. So again, they're trying to limit combustible leaf from, basically it's gone from 4 stories, which is 55 feet to 70 feet tall, up to 91 feet, which is built over 2 stories of that. So they're finding out the higher they go, the more risk they're going to have, the more burden financially that's going to be placed on the local government and the residents when these disasters happen. And there it is. seeks to quantify these risks in terms of adverse impact on the government, local businesses, and findings can then be used to inform the discussion on cost of construction. See, the price you pay for something is a different equation than the cost of that. If you buy something that's cheap and you gotta replace it 3 times, you'd have been better off buying something that's a little better quality and not having to go through that. You know what I mean? I get it, people, part of the healing thing, when a fire comes through, we gotta rebuild, we wanna get back in here. Okay, but what we're trying to do, including the people in this room, is inform people that you're gonna make the largest single financial decision of your life. You know, tap the brakes, do a little more research. We have options, okay? We have options that are gonna be economically gonna fit that budget. And then the key findings, so this is based on that impact study. Based on the, what they came together with was a certain impact based on fire and mid-rise residential buildings. The county could lose $28.9 million in tax revenue that year by building a building that's non-resilient. Okay, so we'll get into a little costing. And again, these are just, this is going to be a little higher, a little lower depending on the cost of the materials nearby. But if you look at this, 19 to 22 bucks for ICF walls installed finished. Okay, you look at what 2x6 framing is going to run or masonry, we're right in there. You know, not to mention the speed of construction, the tremendous advantage from a standpoint of insulation. You know, if you're going to stay on, let's say it's 2% more than you would have to build a wood frame house to, think about the fact that your insurance is going to go down a little bit. Why? You have a fire-resistant structure. My own house, my insurance went down 17%. Not a huge number, but that's like 2 rounds of golf. I got my priorities. Okay, you go into a situation where 55% on average of your energy bill is going to the power company versus staying in your wallet. That's part of that cost. And people are starting to understand that. You're doing a better job of looking at it. And then commercially, it's the same thing. CMU wall, you're going to have 7 trades putting up those walls. You look at an ICF wall, basically 3 trades. So it's going to go up faster, and you're looking at a savings of almost $6 a square foot. That's a pretty big number, especially if you factor it over the period of 20,000 square feet or more. According to the Resilient Design Institute, resilient design is defined intentional design of buildings, landscape, communities, regions in response to vulnerabilities, to disaster, and normal disruption of life. Or in other words, we got to stop building stuff out of fuel. It's period. I mean, look what lumber did this spring. What was it, up to $1,400 a unit or something? Does everybody think that's just a one-off? Think it'll happen again? I'm not a bet man, but I thought I'd put some money down there for sure. So the biggest single thing you have to deal with is trying to think about not the day you're moving in, but 5 years down the road. You know, if you have a more energy efficient structure on a shorter term basis now, whatever it might have cost you to build that versus a conventional material, you've probably recovered that in savings. And not to mention, who was the one that was up here earlier? It might have been Rob, at how quiet the house was. You know, I lived in 2 of these things. You know, and if I knew I was going to have twin daughters, I'd have done every dang wall of the house on it. You know, but that's the thing. You live in a residential neighborhood. You have neighbors on all 4 sides. You have traffic. You literally don't hear a thing. It's like living in a sensory deprivation tank with windows. It's a cool experience. Okay, these are some, Inverness, California. Everybody know where that is? Point Reyes area. This is years ago. Okay, fire came through, and we're talking really steep terrain, really narrow roads. I mean, it was a perfect storm. Emergency services couldn't get there to save anybody's house. A few people decided, hey, let's not build that if something's going to burn again. The one thing they didn't do was take it a step further and eliminate some features as far as beams and stuff like that. That could be a potential fuel source for down the road. Okay, this was an article in the Wall Street Journal. Okay, this guy built his house in Malibu, and 5 bedrooms, it wasn't a first-time home buyer. Okay, this guy was a general contractor. Then the Woolsey fire came. Okay, morning of November 9th, he was supposed to have a meeting with the guy. The guy called him and said, I can't get up the hill, the roads are closed. He looked out the hill, here comes the fire. He's living in an ICF home. He had a hard coat stucco on the outside. He had basically an ember-resistant roof design, which is a huge feature to think about. No soffit vents, anything like that. His the Channel 5 KTLA helicopter was flying over. His Prius, he was loaded up in his Prius. Fire came up. He started the hoses, couldn't put the fire out, got second-degree burns, runs back into his house. Okay, and his wife is watching this live broadcast. His Prius is completely engulfed. All the trees around the house are going up. Can't even see the house. She's freaking out. Okay? He walks out with second-degree burns. Basically, everything around him is gone. That's what's left. When he was building that place, he looked at the terrain and goes, if there's ever a fire here, we better have a backup plan or something. So he put, big water tanks in them. Now, if you look at Malibu, they have that defensible space thing. So everybody that's building up there, you have rules that are forcing you to make sure that something like this doesn't necessarily happen again. But the way that fire goes up the hill, 70 miles an hour, you're not outrunning it. And, if your house is made out of something from a fuel standpoint, it's just a matter of time. So he had some minor smoke damage, and that was it. So there's an argument to do this. And this was a commercial concrete guy in Santa Rosa, smart guy, did the exterior walls, did a insulated concrete deck. Yes, sir.
I sold him the house.
You did?
Yeah. That was my first.
Sorry, we're not supposed to have any kind of sales pitches. just in case. Are we recording? It's good. He did steel studs on the interior, okay? But what he did with the roof was bizarre. This is his ceiling. Usually when you see an insulated deck material, you're doing like a shed roof or a simple, gable. This guy had, I don't know how many hips and valves he had in that thing, but
all those surroundings are all just huge beams.
Yeah,
way over engineered.
He went ahead and he had all the shoring because he's a commercial concrete contractor. He threw this thing up, and you gotta guy's got some stones, man. So it was pretty cool. Okay, this next one here, hopefully the technology gods are with us. I'm sorry if this is going to strike a nerve with some people, but it's definitely worth watching. Come on, come on. Oops. Oh, man. No kidding. You should see that in front of us. Beautiful.
It's on the left bottom.
On the left.
Oh, there it is. I see. Here we go.
The only home in their Santa Clarita neighborhood to be completely destroyed by fire.
Maybe I can set this
The home.
There we go.
In the early morning hours of October 25th, 2019, the Palos family watched their home burn on ABC 7. The family wept as their home became a casualty of the tick fire. The only home in their Santa Clarita neighborhood to be completely destroyed by fire.
Going from having everything to nothing is just an unbelievable experience because you just don't know where to go.
In that moment, Ryan Palos turned to the internet, knowing he never wanted to worry about wildfires again.
I Googled it, fireproof home. That's where the genesis was of this.
This image of a fire-ravaged suburb of San Diego with 3 homes still standing caught his eye. Homes built with insulating concrete forms, not with wood.
The photo of it after the fire span again, 3 homes utilized this same technology and survived.
The materials that are used in the structure will not ignite. There's no wood in the structure.
Lori Fisher and Phoenix Development bill themselves as the only design-build team in California specializing in ICF construction and design. That teamwork streamlines the effort to rebuild. The building materials reduce the cost.
It's very predictable. It's always foam, concrete, and rebar. No matter how tall we go, no matter how deep in the ground we go, no matter what openings we have, it's always going to be those 3 things.
The foam bricks interlock and are then filled with concrete, which won't ignite in a fire. Termites, dry rot, or damage to wood from the sun also will never be an issue. Built floor by floor, the foam and concrete also provide incredible insulation, using roughly 50% of the energy needed to heat and cool a home of similar size. Another advantage of this home can be found in an empty wall versus one that has already been poured. The home's pretty much soundproof. The build began in January, and the family expects to move in by July. A synthetic stucco will be applied directly to the foam outside and will look, for the most part, like any other home on the street.
The only difference is that we do have a standing seam metal roof. It does not ignite, it's non-combustible construction. No matter how many sparks fall on that roof, it will never burn.
ICF technology is not new, but it's also not commonly used yet. Many people don't even know it's an option, but that's something that Palos family hopes changes.
For us not to know about it is frankly kind of scary. Thank God he found it, and I think this is something that everyone should know about.
I think there's some potential for fire.
The core also prevents fire by slowing the conduction of heat from one side of the wall to the other. In testing, ICF wall segments didn't allow enough heat through to start a fire on the cool side of the wall for 2 to 4 hours.
And that should be enough time for fire crews to get out there.
Meaning inside the home, you're also safe.
You know, I don't, I've seen a lot of newscasts.
Feeling of making things happen. Of letting go. That
You
feeling.
don't need any commercial interruptions. Okay, so again, they use steel trusses, steel joists on the inside. There's no fuel in the house. Porter roof. Talk to the builder. Where's this coming in? He says, well, here's the thing. They're in a high seismic area, high wind area, and they put all those extras in the home that homeowners want called windows and doors. Okay, now when you do that, the engineers are challenged for shear resistance. If that were a wood frame house, they'd have shear walls everywhere. Shear walls are not cheap. It takes extra labor to put them in, extra hardware. So by having a clean build like this, he says effectively when this house is done, it's going to come out within 1% of what it would have cost to build it out of wood, and it's resilient.
It's going to cost a lot less to heat and cool over the lifetime.
Yeah, where they're located, I mean, they got some coastal stuff, but I mean, at the same time, you're right. I mean, over a period of lifetime, the percentage is still going to be, it's a question of where's your number going to start and stop. If that were Phoenix, it's going to be way up here. If you're in a more of a moderate climate, it's going to be down here. There it is done, they're moved in. Any questions? Any comments? Yeah, Chelsea?
What do you do with the scraps of your log?
Okay, the foam is 100% recyclable, so is the plastic. It's a question of finding a recycler that'll take it. And so what ends up happening is they have some pretty specific criteria for taking the foam back. They don't want any concrete on it. They don't want any marker pens, like if somebody's been writing on the wall. They don't want any of that stuff. So they're pretty picky about taking it. I think they're the closest one to here, and I could be wrong. I think there was a recycler that was taking stuff in Hayward at one time. I don't know if they're still around or not. But the webs, they want the foam separated from the webs. There's a little bit of work there, but It doesn't have to end up in a landfill. Okay, this stuff's got a half-life of 500 years. And I have no idea, I stuck around long enough to figure that one out, but, yeah.
Are they producing box blocks down in Universal? Do you have a Bateman?
Sort of.
Sort of, yeah. that company down there, they'll take it.
But it will, okay, McFarland then?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I couldn't remember the name.
So the other thing we're getting into that's really not part of the thing was, right now, the biggest single problem we're having in our industry, not to mention others, I mean, it applies to furniture, appliances, groceries, whatever, massive labor shortage, okay? So the thing that people need to understand is ordering something and pulling it off the shelf in 5 days or so, those days are going to be strained. They're going to be very rare. And I would say that's going to be the same thing going into probably at least the second quarter next year. Until we get people back to work and the plants can expand their workforce and they can get the volume back up again, then once it's made, there's the other issue. Now you got to get a truck underneath it. Look what's going on in LA and Long Beach Harbor. There's 70 container ships out there full of stuff that's just sitting out there waiting for somebody to pick it up. So we're living in a time where the supply chain's a little fractured. Yeah.
Like, where's the air barrier go, and what is it made out of it?
You don't need one. You don't have to put tie-back over this at all.
Well, what about it when you're attaching siding? Do you need
No.
The siding?
No, this exceeds the firm factor that the code requires for air moisture penetration. So
attach right to the
direct apply. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to do a wood product, you want to do something from the standpoint of a drainage layer behind it, just because you want to have air get back there so it'll dry it out. But if that's like a hardy or cement siding, direct apply, no issues. Okay, we're going to do a real quick demo. We have a lot of experts in here. I want 2 people that have never touched this stuff before.
Come on, Jesse.
Come on, Brad.
Yes.
Get
this guy right here.
Okay. So, now you were paying attention to the entire presentation, correct? The same is written right there. I have that same effect on my wife. Okay. So, where are you going to start? Corner. All right. Get that guy. Tell you what, we'll buy you lunch today. How's that? Okay. Then you're going to go ahead. You're going to start this one over there. Now, this particular system uses a couple of metal restraints. And what that does is it sucks them together to the point where when you're laying the wall out, the wall's not going to grow. It also, when you make a cut, that cut's not going to change. You're going to snap these things right in there like that. Boom. And there you have it. Now the next corner, which would be a long tail, would come the other direction. Do we have another corner back there, Raul?
Yes.
Could you kindly bring that up here? I will. Muchos gracias. Put the label here. There we go.
What was that you said as I was walking out? I didn't understand.
Okay, would you kindly hand this to our 2 participants, sir? Okay, so, look at this guy here. I think he's been watching movies or something. Short return and a long return. So what you want to do now is start with the short return going the other way. That sets up your stagger, offsets your interlock. These things lock right down. Put this guy together. Put a couple here. There you go, big guy. This guy's been, what, you've been driving a backhoe since you were 5 or something? You ever played with a Lego set, an oversized coat hanger? Oh yeah. Bingo. A lot of people watching, they want to go a little faster. We eat pressure for breakfast. Bingo, perfect. I love that sound. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of wall, so that's about 22 square feet of wall we just put together in a matter of seconds. Pretty cool. All right, and when you start going vertical, you want to make sure that you're going to have some form of restraint for uplift. Some systems have like a fish hook in their web You pound that down, it grabs. This particular one, we use these. Horizontal, vertical, same thing. You snap these in. I mean, the beauty of these things is back in the old days, we used to use zip ties. And found out that on really hot days, zip ties would stretch. So you cinch those things down, then you go out and pour the wall, next thing you got movement. This thing's not going to move upwards. If it can't move upwards, it's not going to move laterally. So very, very important. So is this right side up or upside down? It's reversible. Poor guy set him up. So, I mean, that's basically all the systems are going to be very, very similar as far as the process to get started. And then they're going to have their own little idiosyncrasies as to once you get off the ground, start putting in your bucks. Your alignment system is critical, okay? There's alignment systems out there that you can basically involve lumber. They're very inexpensive. People buy those things. It's a wrestling match. First of all, you got to get lumber that's straight. You have a precision molded product and you got a crooked bricks. Who's going to win that day? So use the systems, use them properly. Pretty much all the companies have online training for contractors. Also have online training for dealers. They have YouTube channels, so check that information out, do your research, and then if you're going to be building anything, give us a call because, we're willing to help you with this. We absolutely don't want to ever see this again, period. Any other questions? Yeah.
I do. What question do you guys have after seeing this go together like that?
Well, I've dealt with the former system like this. It's time sensitive.
Okay.
Quicker than framing.
Nice.
Just lift as you come up. You go two cells, 3 cells.
Yeah, and again, since it's a form, it's based on the ACI code. ACI code is basically, 3.79 feet at 70 degrees Fahrenheit per hour? Yeah? Just say yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so you're pouring a 12-foot wall. You're not going to pour 4 feet and come back the next day. That's going to cost you another pump charge. Going to create a cold joint, which these two guys just love. So you stack it up 12 feet, make 3 consecutive 4-foot lifts. You have a monolithically poured concrete wall that's structurally reinforced. One day, one pour. Any other questions?
And then for moisture barrier, on the inside using like the Matsche 1000?
Nothing. Sheetrock directly applied.
But for basement?
Oh, basement, yeah. So you're going to, on the backside, you're going to want to waterproof it. Okay, no hot tar. I got to tell that story now, don't I? Okay, Cottage Grove, Oregon, black hole of my career for 3 weeks. Guy called up, was going to build a daylight basement under a manufactured home. Don't call it a mobile home, that's insulting. Manufactured home. So he's calling me up and he's ready to write the Pope. This is the greatest thing since Jesus walked on water, I swear. 2 days later, I'm holding the phone out here. He's carving me. I said, where are you at? I'm at the job site. Okay, I got to go to a meeting. I'll be there in 2 hours. I drive down. This guy's got a driveway that goes like this, 1,500-year-old junipers every 20 feet. I couldn't live there. I drink. Anyway, I get there, and I start biting my palm when I'm about 100 feet away. This guy is taking hot tar, swiped it on the wall. Beautiful concrete wall, because you can see it now. The foam is gone. And I went up there, and I'm a little, crass sometimes, and I said, hey, Einstein, what were you thinking? And he goes, well, I said, look, don't even answer me. He goes, well, what are we going to do now? Well, we aren't going to do anything. Here's what you're going to do. So he had to get his sawzall, cut all the webs off, go down to the stucco guy, get 2.5-inch sheet stock foam, mechanically attach it to the wall. He'll never get a leak there because at the bottom where we met the footing, there was like a 7-inch thick coating material that just created a waterfall on the slide. It's like a time capsule. And that's it. So use a waterproofing product below grade, use a protection board, because when you backfill, you don't want any rocks to puncture your membrane or your liquid applied waterproofing membrane. Good drain, clean drain rock. Water needs to get away from the building. Doesn't matter if you're building a basement with 2-foot thick walls. Okay, you still want to get the water away from the building. Just use something that's compliant with the foam.
I heard 22 trades mentioned earlier.
Correct.
And I've heard this is 6 trades in one or 6 steps.
Well, 6 steps in one.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the 6 steps?
Well, again, if you're going to frame a wall, you're going to frame the wall, you're going to stand it up. Step 1, okay? Then you get a framing inspection, okay? Now you got to go ahead and you got to put sheeting on the outside of the frame. You also got to have to put Tyvek on there, okay? Typically the framers are going to handle all that. But what's also happening now too is you're eliminating a couple different inspections. If you're an installer and you're putting these up, you're getting your framing draw, you're getting your insulation draw, you're basically getting 3 draws in one. So instead of having to wait for money from the bank, you put this up, you're going to get a high proportion of that draw in the very first step after pouring this thing. And contractors that have utilized this can probably clarify that. So you're still going to need an electrician, you're still going to need a plumber, but the wall system itself saves steps as far as that versus insulation of a frame wall.
Why is it that the trades, when they're bidding a job, electrician, plumber, why are they always adding all these contingency costs to it?
They're basically probably haven't been informed. And that's what I was saying about education. You know, one of the things I used to do is have pre-con meetings. You know, get the trades in there. Their resistance is going to come in the form of not knowing. If they understand and know and realize, oh, hey, this is nothing better than, or nothing different than I've been doing. A bunch of electricians, when I lived in Bend, 5 electricians in that town went out and bought 2 or 3 electric chainsaws, drill a hole in the guide bar, put a wheel in there for a depth gauge. They will not upcharge on an ICF home versus a framed house. Of course, they don't tell the customer they can do it 3 times faster either. But no, really, if that wall's poured, you're putting a chase in here as fast as you can walk. That's a lot faster than drilling studs. So the sub-trades are coming around. What causes the resistance of the bid to be higher is based on the fact that they haven't been informed or educated. And that's not really going to be, that's not very difficult to do. They just need to get a guy in a room for 10 minutes and show him. Piece of cake.
Where's the air barrier, vapor barrier? Where is it? I don't understand how.
No, you don't have one. Because of the concrete wall and the density of the foam, you're not required to put Tyvek on the outside of these things.
Okay.
So you're not dealing with building paper. Technically speaking, if you're putting 3-coat stucco up with chicken wire, you don't need to add felt to that either. Most stucco applicators still do. Why? Something happens, who's going to get the first phone call? And they'll do that. But by code, it's not required to do. You really still want to flash and seal around window and door openings. That's the only place you could have any maintenance issues on ICF projects at all. You do that, and these things are going to be tight, they're going to be energy efficient. The beauty of this in the wood frame wall, in this temperature, wall's expanding and contracting every day, cracking plaster, finishes getting loose. Very stable wall system. You're not going to have that expansion and contraction, so you're going to have less maintenance over the same time too.
And Mike?
Yes, sir.
It's not really that you don't need a vapor barrier, it's that stuff is the vapor barrier.
You don't need an additional
You don't need
vapor
an
barrier.
additional, yeah.
Thank you for pointing out my deficiency. Sure.
I'm kidding. From the point of view, I mean, I think Mike's done a fantastic job here of presenting it. And one of the things I would say is from an architectural standpoint, and looking at things from the energy factor of this type of product, is that we talk about reducing energy costs by having a product like this. We could talk about you reducing cooling. Now, the building codes require that you heat a house. There's no 2 ways around that. Nothing says that you have to cool a house. And most of the houses that we design, we try and eliminate cooling completely. The house that I built for myself and my family in Napa, part of which I built out of this product a while ago, no cooling whatsoever. And I designed the house specifically to not need cooling. So if you don't have cooling, you can't spend any money on cooling. And it solves a huge problem. And if we could take a look at all the houses that we do, and a lot of commercial buildings too, and say, we'll start from the point of view of do we need cooling or don't we? We can do it with this. And if we're talking about saving the planet, what a difference that makes. So it's for all architects and designers and contractors, it's worth taking a look at to see how you can do it. And then also looking at the types of heating systems that you would use that take advantage of the fact that these walls, I mean, the equivalency R factor we use, Mike, is around 65.
Right. I mean, if you're going to compare this to a wood frame structure, you'd have to insulate a wood frame structure to almost an R65.
Yeah.
What's that going to cost? That's a ton of money.
Yeah.
And you're still going to have something that's made out of fuel.
Yeah. Trevor, anything you'd like to add?
No, I feel good. I mean, he taught me all everything I learned about 20 years ago. So
I get blamed for stuff that happened.
I do have a question about if there is damage.
Sure.
What that looks like for repair.
I mean, from a fire? Or something?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, being in California, I'm not worried about hurricanes.
Yeah, well, hey man, you know, I'm telling you. One shows up here, I'm calling you. Basically the way these systems work is there has to be a flame retardant molded into the EPSV is a modified heat. There's a flame retardant in it. It's not any HBCD, which was under fire in this state because of toxic fumes like in furniture and things like that. The industry abolished the use of that flame retardant probably about 5 years ago, maybe longer. But there is a flame retardant in here, so if you hold a match to it, it would melt the bullet away, it self-extinguishes. The only way this stuff would ever burn is if you have a fuel source feeding it. So, a couple situations where a guy was working in a shop with an arc welder, and a pile of rags ignited. There were some wood pallets. Those caught fire. He went out of the building, shut the door, called the fire department. They showed up. The fire basically, as soon as the fuel source was extinguished, okay, it stopped spreading.
Right.
It doesn't spread, right. If you got a wiring short in your wood framed house, okay, you have two fuel sources to feed that and make it go. Okay, this you have none.
Right, well, I live in the Santa Cruz Mountains and I'm building an ICF house.
Right.
So I got a fuel source everywhere.
Okay.
So now if fire goes
space.
through, melts a bunch of stuff, like
Right.
what does the repair look like for something like that?
Okay, so what would happen in that case is if, let's say the foam, you had an area here where it just dissolved and went away. Okay, first thing you're gonna figure out is the structural integrity of the concrete still there? And if it is, then what you just do is square cut off the burnt sections or the melted sections. You have to probably go ahead and chisel off some of the webs or take a grinder, get rid of those. Then you're gonna you're gonna have to mechanically attach some furring strips to that to be able to put whatever finishes you had on it. If you have stucco, or like a synthetic stucco, that's a piece of cake. You're just gonna mechanically attach your foam to the concrete, and the guy's gonna come back out there and scratch around.
Right, so for the most part, you can just patch it.
Right. Nothing is fireproof, okay? Nothing is earthquake proof. And there's been some comments on some news broadcasts, and I mean, these guys that were on that video, that newscast, that was one of the better ones we've ever heard because they didn't make any stupid comments at the end. They actually went straight through and really did a great job of commenting on what they saw out there. But there's people out there that are, oh yeah, it's fireproof. There's nothing that's fireproof or earthquake proof. You know, I mean, there was a guy, what was it, the Kmart in Santa Rosa, tilt up concrete walls. Roof went, walls come down. Doesn't matter. So, but again, if you eliminate the fuel, you build yourself a defensible space, which I mean, Santa Cruz Mountain is beautiful, I get it. But, you know, if you're up there and your escape route is limited, you got to think about what could happen and then come up with a plan. But at least your house isn't going to make any contribution to that fuel. That's the beauty of it. Yeah.
Hey, Mike, I was going to say, my roofers did a really good fire test for me that I didn't actually ask for them to do. But on my personal home, and I live in Boise, and then I just built a home north of Boise up in the mountains at 5,000 feet, surrounded by trees, same deal. But we were not there. The roofers were working. The framers had just left. It was cold and snowy. They had a fire burning down in front of the front door of the house. Everybody had left except for a couple roofers. They were cutting waterproofing on the top of the roof to put down the metal roof. And as they're up there, they're throwing the roofing off, doing this. Unbeknownst to anybody until days later, they had thrown a piece of the bitumen off. It hit the fire and stuck to the side of the ICF built, because we hadn't sided or nothing, it's just raw ICF. Stuck to the side on fire and burned a hole about this big in my ICF right under my bedroom window.
How'd the wall look?
So the wall is great, yeah, great consolidation. I was happy to see it. That was a good way to check that I was getting under the windows, good vibration, everything. But what it did was really interesting was, imagine that happened on a stick frame house and everybody left the job site, that house is gone, right?
Yeah.
But the ability that it burned itself out. So that bitumen thing, the only way we figured it out was there was a little strip of the bitumen laying on the ground under this hole. So when I walked up to my front door 2 days later, there was just a big gap and concrete sticking out, but the webs did not ignite. The webs were whole. And so what we ended up doing is when we had our spray foamer come in, he came in and he spray foamed it. We straightened it off. We still have our webs for siding. Everything's still there. But that was, you want to talk about a fuel. I had an actual, petroleum-based ignition stuck to the side of my ICF house, and it didn't light the house on
Did
fire.
they even know, hey, we think this is a good place for a window?
Yeah, it was right under the window, so I got that. It was
Did
fine,
your roofer
but,
try to blame the plumber or some nonsense?
Yeah, and I've got pictures. Anyone wants to see it? Trust me, my roofer got a text message pretty quick.
So Mike, how do you think, in a big earthquake, how do you think an ICF house, just for everybody, I kind of really answer this question, holds up?
If you look at the way structures are built, light gauge framing is designed to withstand some earthquake movement. But if you look at the way the corners are made, you have two studs that go into one stud, and that allows for some movement. But under a prolonged situation, when buildings fail, the corners come apart, and that's when they come down. If you look at ICF, it's connected monolithically around the corner, so the weakest part of a frame structure is actually the strongest part of our system. And that's one of the nice things about how these things will, like when the Loma Prieta quake showed up, masonry went up in the air, came down and exploded, red steel sheared. The thing that rode it out the best was reinforced concrete. In fact, DSA, a small organization in the State Division of State Architects, they oversee the, look at him. I woke him up. They oversee the public school system. So if you're going to build a building on a campus that's public school system under the jurisdiction of DSA, there's a whole mess of hoops you got to jump through. DSA does not approve products; they approve projects. And there's been several DSA schools that have been built in this state, and a lot of that happened after the Loma Prieta quake, because what they did after that, they took the value of masonry and pretty much chopped it in half based on what they learned out of that event. When you have a disaster, there's always, they learn something. What happens after a disaster and they learn things? What happens to the codes? They change the codes. They don't make it less restrictive, they make it more restrictive. So they're finding out now that building public buildings of masonry, when they can do something like this, which is a reinforced solid concrete wall, that's a better deal.
No, the tallest buildings in the West Coast are reinforced concrete.
So, any other questions? Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Those are my grandkids, and that's my dog. He's a big Niner fan. That's, what are you, a Ram fan or something? Packers. Packers? Oh, you cheese there.
Hey, on that note, go back home. No, anyway, we are going to have some lunch, but also Tim Blake with the California Nevada Cement Association, while we're having our lunch, is going just to talk about, we talked about ways to reduce our global warming potential and optimize mix design. Tim's just going to touch on a couple ways that we can positively impact that conversation as well. So let's eat, move, interact.
Are we ready?
Yeah. All right, Tim.
All right. This has absolute value. First of all, I want to say a really, really big thank you and appreciation to Patrick. It's an immense amount of energy for him and his team to put this together. He deserves a great applause. So next, this has absolutely nothing to do with this event, but I want to give you a little bit of a piece of what it's like. I have a deep passion for the environment, making a difference for future generations. That's why I'm so passionate about making a difference for CO2 reduction. This is a page out of my Imagery to Life book to help challenge kids, to help ease their angst. It's just one page. This is when way falls over the air. Were you talking anything there? Portland Limestone Cement. I think you've probably all heard about it. It's not rocket science. What they do is they take cement, they take 10% of cement off the table, they replace it back in limestone. So by definition, it saves about 10% of CO2 emissions when you use Portland Limestone Cement. It's been used extensively in Europe for decades. It's used in Canada, it's used extensively in Vancouver, Seattle, and now we bring it to California. So just to give you an idea of the impact of this, for every 1 million square feet of construction done in concrete, it's the equivalent of a year's worth of growth of 192 acres of forest. It's a big thing. So I just want to put that light bulb moment in your minds and your hearts to say, every time you think about cement, you think about PLC, Portland Limestone Cement, it really can be a current game changer in the environment. Tom Teets is the executive director for California Nevada Cement Association. He's created the future path of an immense process, and eventually, by the year 2045, we will have the cement industry in California net carbon zero. It's the first step, actionable step that can be taken now. So I love all the conversations about making it in the environment, and we all have different visions of what global climate change means to us. For me, I would say, I look at this and I think one of the biggest impacts right now is what's happening with the ice that we have both in the North and the South Pole. And I think of little creatures like this, or big monster creatures, that are really being jeopardized for their future. And it impacts all of us. But the vision that I have through this Portland Limestone Cement with the California Nevada Cement Association is creating beautiful buildings like this. And this beautiful building, equivalently, because of using Portland Limestone Cement, saves an estimated 500 acres of forest trees equivalency. And this, Talus Garden, about a 1,400 acres of forest saved a year. This Acute Care Center. The story keeps going. So it's just fabulous what we can do. And another example, 29-story building, Portland Limestone Cement, and about 200 acres of forest equivalency saved. And Solo District, equivalency of about 2,700 tons of CO2 saved, equivalent to over 3,000 acres of forest a year. Vancouver House, the examples keep coming. Exchange Building in Vancouver, BC. Wall Center, Falls Creek, another example. And another example in Mark, Trump International Tower. I'm just trying to give you an example. This is pervasive in the marketplace. It's so thrilling to bring it to California. And I love the idea of what you do here in Paradise, to have that part of the solution too. So no matter how small a change you make, everything makes a difference. And right now, Torrey Pines in San Diego, beautiful buildings. What's interesting about this, they had no idea they were saving CO2 emissions. They selected it because it was an upgrade version of a lighter version of cement for color reflectivity. And then as bonus said, oh, look what we did. We wound up saving equivalent of over 3,700 acres of tree of carbon capture in a year. So thanks for keeping that in mind. If anybody has any connection points for I go up and down the state talking with different architects and developers of what this means to the environment and what it means to the future. And I'm collaborating with major players in the marketplace to do this. And it's so great to be here. I just so appreciate what you're all doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim, that was awesome. Save the planet. Let's grab our hard hats and go look at some sites.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going through a newly completed ICF home. Very impressive.
And but then again, you step sliding against that.
Awesome. See me there. I'll be there running around, same way as
So how's the nail gun?
Nice to meet you.
Is it going to bounce?
Thanks for the email, Terry.
You're very welcome.
And then bulldoze that shit so like 50 inches deep. Really looks cool. I'm sure that we're supposed to ship by itself.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. And people hate it.
Well, yeah,
Can't you disable that for me? I'm like, no, I can't. But if you pull that pin out of that hinge, yeah.
Well, yeah, you gotta just put a door stop on it.
It's just so ingrained in your brain.
Definitely thinking to the future. Yeah. Yeah, they did okay on storage here.
There's the guy who's been doing this for years.
You know, part of me just wants to slam that door as hard as I can and like put my hand right here and see if I can feel it flex at all. Because I got 4 kids, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, do you get all the pictures rattling on the side of the room? It seems like it would be comfortable.
Basically working through, you know, if I got to split a truck with somebody or what, because we ship only full truckloads. So I would have to do something with a truckload and split it. So we'll figure it out.